Welcome to today's deep dive. If you look at the standard advice for, achieving a goal, securing a dream, or frankly just trying to get your life together, you'll probably notice it almost always relies on this hidden expectation of magic.
Yeah, it really does. You're basically told to write your goals down in a journal, close your eyes, wish really hard, and just wait for the universe to deliver.
Right, you drop a coin in the wishing well and cross your fingers.
Exactly.
But if you've been relying on those methods, like scripting your goals 50 times a day, doing the whole 369 method, or I don't know, listening to 528 hertz frequencies in your sleep, and your reality just hasn't budged, well, this deep dive is for you.
Because the problem with that whole wishing well approach is that it basically treats reality as something romantic, like it's malleable based on your emotions. But the source text we're looking at today takes a completely inverse approach.
It strips away the magical thinking entirely.
Totally. It replaces it with a strict computational system. It operates on the premise that reality isn't this whimsical entity granting favors. It's an unforgiving operating system that is just processing your inputs.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the core premise of the text is that your manifestation practices are glitching out because you're trying to run highly complex software on completely outdated hardware.
Right.
The source insists you need an upgrade from a low-resolution reality to what it calls a 16-bit upgrade. So we're moving away from whimsical magic to a really precise system of inputs and outputs.
Yeah, and to understand the mechanics of this upgrade, we have to look at the baseline problem, which the text labels zero-bit energy.
Zero-bit energy. Okay, what does that actually look like?
Well, it defines behaving with zero-bit energy as acting like an NPC, a non-player character.
Oh, like in a video game.
Exactly. In a computational environment, an NPC doesn't generate new code. They just, they run on a pre-programmed background loop. They don't affect the world at all. The world affects them.
So you're essentially just running on default settings, hoping the game changes around you.
That's the mechanical failure of the NPC state, yeah. You're waiting for external events to alter your internal programming, which is completely backwards. It's a reversal of how the system actually works.
Right.
So the goal is the 16-bit upgrade. The text defines this as a high-definition state of operation. In a 16-bit state, there is no latency, no blur, and just total clarity between what you want and what you actually do.
If we think about this in terms of bandwidth zero-bit manifesting, is kind of like trying to stream a 4K movie on terrible congested dial-up Wi-Fi.
Well, that's a great way to put it.
Right. You have this massive, beautiful data packet, which is your goal, but your internal system just lacks the bandwidth to process it. So the reality engine can only render it as this blurry, freezing, pixelated mess. It's so frustrating.
It is.
But the 16-bit upgrade is like plugging directly into the Ethernet. It's absolute clarity.
What's fascinating here is how this strict computer logic completely neutralizes all the emotional baggage we normally attach to failure.
Oh.
Well, if you're getting a blurry picture in your life, the universe isn't testing you, right? It isn't punishing you. You just simply have a weak signal.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And to establish that high-definition 16-bit connection, the source outlines this closed-loop system that requires 3 specific inputs, which it calls the drops. And the mandate is absolute here. If even one of these drops leaks, the entire vibe is ruined and the system crashes.
Which is really interesting because we usually only hear about, having a vision and taking action. But this framework adds so much structural integrity. So let's look at the first input required to run this 16-bit system. The source calls this the white drop.
The white drop. This is the primary data packet. It represents the vision and the intent. And this is really where the text differentiates the 0-bit MPC from what it calls the 16-bit queen.
The 16-bit queen. I love that term.
It's great, right? And the distinction all hinges on the mechanics of how intent is actually broadcast.
Yeah.
Because the 0-bit MPC relies on wishing. But neurologically and systemically wishing implies a state of lack.
Because if you're wishing for it, you are actively acknowledging that you don't have it.
Exactly.
You're broadcasting a signal of absence to the entire system.
Precisely the issue. The system reads the code of lack and just faithfully renders a reality of lack. The 16-bit queen, on the other hand, operates through command.
Command.
Yeah. And the text introduces a really specific psychological mechanism here called the Pazienti flash.
The Pacienti flash. Okay, so the text describes this as the exact moment you see the vision so clearly that it is already real. But I kind of want to push back on this terminology slightly.
Sure, go for it.
Because if you're listening to this and trying to implement it, you might wonder, isn't authorizing or commanding just a fancy way of saying you're hoping really, really hard? Like, how is this actually mechanically different?
Right, I see what you mean.
Mm-hmm.
But if we connect this to the bigger picture of how executive functioning works, the psychological distinction becomes really clear.
Okay.
Wishing and hoping are subordinate emotional plays. You are basically asking an external authority to grant you a favor. But the Pacienti flash, which is actually a term rooted in ancient philosophies of sound and thought manifesting into form, it's an instantaneous high-definition cognitive lock. It is an executive function. It's a command from a place of true authority.
So there's no buildup. It's just the moment a desired reality is recognized as a completed absolute fact in the brain.
Exactly. It's the difference between asking a system for permission and giving the system an administrative directive. The text has a really strict rule here, too. It says, if you are trying to believe, you've already lost. You have to authorize it.
You have to authorize it. Wow. And authorizing is like an emotionless executive function?
Yeah, think about a network administrator authorizing a protocol. They don't sit at the keyboard, cross their fingers, and try to believe the data will transfer.
No, they just hit enter.
Right, they just hit execute from a place of structural authority.
Oh.
That's the white drop. Any emotional desperation just introduces noise into the signal.
So the white drop requires a clean, emotionless authorization of intent. But, and here's where we move to the next step. A pristine software command is completely useless if the hardware absolutely refuses to execute it.
Oh, 100%.
Which leads directly to a major critique the source has of passive manifestation frameworks.
Yes, the system requires a second input to bridge that gap between the code and physical space. The text calls this the red drop.
The red drop, which it defines as the receipts, or basically physical action. And the material explicitly points out that this is exactly where what they call the law of attraction girlies get it completely wrong.
It is a harsh critique, but it makes sense systemically. They authorize the white drop, but absolutely refuse to provide the red drop.
Right. They have the vision, but they don't do anything physical to anchor it.
Exactly. The traditional law of attraction heavily emphasizes that Pacienti flash, the feeling, the vision, the belief, but it completely neglects the physical mechanics of anchoring that data into three-dimensional space.
And to explain how this anchoring works, the text unpacks this terminology called the Dausal Code. And within the Dausal Code, it states that execution is the suture. So let's define that.
So Dausal is used in the text as a mashup of digital and causal. It treats physical reality not as this chaotic, unpredictable environment, but as a digital environment where cause and effect are bound by strict code.
Okay.
And in the Dausal Code, every physical action you take is a line of programming. It either reinforces or contradicts your white drop.
And so action acts as the suture. Just like in medicine, a suture stitches two things together to heal them. Action physically stitches the internal cognitive vision, the white drop, to the external physical reality.
Yes, that's exactly it. If you have the vision, but you don't actually execute the physical behaviors of the person who lives in that vision, the intent just leaks out. The suture fails.
Which brings us to a specific error the text calls skip scanning.
Oh, skip scanning is such a common failure point. It's the error of not acting like the version of yourself who already has what you're manifesting. You're attempting to render a final outcome without fulfilling the prerequisite physical actions.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because if we map skip scanning to gaming, the mechanics of why this fails make perfect sense.
Let's hear it.
So imagine you're playing a video game, like an RPG, right? And your white drop is to defeat the final boss. You have authorized the intent, you see it. But instead of playing the previous levels, building up your scats, grinding for experience, and acquiring the necessary armor, basically providing the red drop receipts, you try to use a cheat code to skip straight to the final encounter.
Right.
What happens? The system immediately wipes you out.
Because you literally lack the structural hardware to survive that encounter. The reality engine checks your stats, sees that the dependencies haven't been met, and rejects the render.
Exactly. You wanted the reality of the final level without providing the physical receipts of the journey. The universe didn't punish you, you just didn't have the hardware. You skip scanned.
Which is exactly why the red drop is non-negotiable. Action is the physical proof to the Dausal system that you are actually capable of holding the reality you authorized.
So if you've programmed your intent with the white drop, and you've executed the action with the red drop. How do you actually measure if the system is running correctly without, just lying to yourself?
That is the big question. You need a diagnostic test.
Right. And the source provides this wonderfully blunt framework for this. It calls it the receipt rule, or the Bacon law.
The Bacon law. I love this concept. It's built on the premise that physical reality serves as the ultimate checksum for your internal programming.
A checksum. Can you explain that for anyone who isn't familiar with the tech term?
Sure. In data transmission, a checksum is an absolute mathematical proof that verifies data integrity. If you send a file, and the output file doesn't perfectly match the input checksum, as an objective fact that the data was corrupted during transit.
So applying that to the Dausal Code, the source argues that your physical lived reality is the ultimate checksum for your system.
Exactly. You cannot debate a checksum. And the text gives a vivid metric for a failed system, which is burnt bacon.
Burnt bacon?
Yeah. The burnt bacon metric is essentially an audit of your actual coordinates. The text says that if you're manifesting a high-value life, but your bank account is constantly overdrawn, your relationships are toxic, and you're just stuck. If your daily life is burnt bacon, your system is objectively out of alignment.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? Well, it means the Bacon law removes all room for ego. You cannot trick the bacon.
No, you can't.
You can curate your aesthetic. You can tell your friends you're in a state of high vibration, post all the affirmations you want. But if the physical output is burnt, it is absolute, undeniable proof that your internal inputs are corrupted.
This raises an important question, though, because human nature dictates that when we are served burnt bacon, our immediate reflex is cognitive dissonance, right? We get mad at the pan.
Oh, completely. We blame the economy, our upbringing, the algorithm.
Exactly. We externalize the system, failure to protect our ego. We convince ourselves that the universe is just testing our resolve.
But the source issues a very strict directive here. Don't get mad at the bacon. Audit your signal.
Audit your signal, yes. If the checksum fails, the error is always in the code. You have to trace the leak. Is your white drop failing because you're wishing instead of authorizing?
Yeah.
Is your red drop failing because you're skip scanning instead of executing the suture?
It's a total paradigm shift. Don't yell at the physical output. Fix your internal code. And the text promises that if you manage to align everything and pass the checksum, you hit this ultimate state called laminar flow.
Laminar flow. It's a concept borrowed from fluid dynamics. It happens when a fluid flows in perfect parallel layers with absolutely no disruption or cross currents. It is the physical opposite of turbulence.
So applied to this framework, laminar flow is just the end of the struggle.
Exactly. When your vision, the white drop, and your action, the red drop, perfectly locked together, the friction disappears. You aren't fighting the environment anymore.
Welcome to the Vajra world.
Yes, the Vajra world. The text describes this as creating a 16-bit render of your actual power. In esoteric traditions, the Vajra represents something functionally indestructible, like a thunderbolt. It signifies a reality built on absolute, unshakable alignment between your internal code and external execution.
That is incredibly powerful. So let's review the architecture of the system we just explored. We started by ditching that low-res, zero-bit energy, the passive wishing well approach of the MPC, throwing out the 528 hertz sleep tracks.
Yeah, getting rid of all that.
We upgraded the OS to a 16-bit framework. We mastered the white drop by abandoning wishing and using the Paciente flash to authorize our reality.
And we secured the red drop, understanding that physical action is the suture required to anchor that data, and we avoided the trap of skip scanning.
And finally, we learned to rely on the Bacon law, using our physical reality as an uncompromisable checksum to audit our signal and enter the Vajra world of laminar flow. The text leaves us with a really demanding yet empowering call to action. Stop wishing. Start auditing.
It demands a profound assumption of responsibility over your own operating system. And, I want to leave you with one final thing to chat on, building on this idea of reality as a strict diagnostic test.
Let's hear it.
Look at the most frustrating piece of burnt bacon in your life right now. The one recurring issue that seems totally immune to all your efforts. What if that specific glitch isn't a failure of the universe, but a perfect, high-definition 16-bit reflection of a subconscious signal you didn't even realize you were broadcasting?
Wow. If that output is consistently burnt, it might be time to stop checking the pan and start checking the code. Remember, don't get mad at the bacon. Audit your signal. Welcome to this deep dive. Today, we are opening a really dense, highly technical source document.
Yeah, it's called Manifesting 2.
Right. And, if you're listening to this right now and you've ever rolled your eyes at vision boards
Oh, absolutely.
or, the idea that you can just sit in your living room, close your eyes and magically wish a new career or a beach house into existence, then this is absolutely for you.
Definitely.
Because today's mission is to decode this framework from the text called the Dausal Code. And honestly, this text takes the whole concept of manifestation, completely strips away all the pop psychology magic, and replaces it with this ruthless mechanical pipeline.
It really does. It frames the entire process as an architectural execution.
Which sounds so intense.
It is. I mean, it's a radical departure from how we usually talk about intent.
Yeah.
We're looking at a system that treats reality like a pristine server room.
Okay, I like that analogy.
Yeah, the document argues that manifestation isn't about yearning or, wanting something really badly. It's this precise clinical moment, what the text calls the systemic suture.
The systemic suture.
Right. It's the moment where your logoic intent and material saturation achieve a phase lock.
Okay, I want to pause right there because logoic intent and material saturation achieving a phase lock is a really heavy way to start.
Yeah, it's a mouthful.
Let's break that down for the listener because logoic comes from logos, right?
Exactly.
Meaning the underlying principle or the pure architectural command.
Right. It implies reason, structure, foundational truth. It is not an emotion.
Right.
And then material saturation simply means physical reality catching up to that command and, fully forming.
Ah, so saturating into the real world.
Exactly. When they phase lock, the internal blueprint perfectly aligns with the external physical reality. But, the text is extremely clear here. This is a rigid, unforgiving system.
Unforgiving how?
Well, if your underlying code is wrong, the reality simply will not render. It just fails.
Wow. Okay, so that immediately changes the stakes. It means there are actual strict rules of execution.
Absolutely.
So if we're going to look at this pipeline from start to finish, we need to figure out where the signal actually begins. If I want to render a new reality, where does that origin signal even start?
So according to the Dausal Code, it starts with an origin point known as the white drop.
The white drop.
Yeah. You can think of the white drop as the absolute genesis, like the pure logoic command. However, the author makes a really crucial distinction about how this drop is actually formed.
Okay.
True manifestation doesn't start with a conscious thought. It begins with something called the Pazienti flash.
The Pazienti flash. It sounds a bit esoteric. What exactly is flashing?
Well, the text describes it as a precognitive 16-bit orientation.
16-bit.
Yeah, it exists before you ever formulate a conscious sentence or like a mental image of what you want.
Okay, wait. 16-bit orientation. The author is borrowing heavily from computing here, right?
Very much so.
Because in tech, a 16-bit system is incredibly foundational. We're talking bare metal, baseline operating system logic.
Exactly.
So if this is precognitive, it means before I even think, I want to start a new business, my brain, my whole system has already flashed a fundamental 16-bit command.
Precisely. And that precognitive aspect is so vital to understand. Because by the time you're actively, consciously wishing for something with words in your head,
You're already late to the game.
you're already downstream from the origin, yeah.
Yeah.
The Pazienti flash is the unfiltered orientation of your entire being. It's not a desire for a result.
So what is it?
Strictly speaking, the text says it is the authorization of a coordinate.
The authorization of a coordinate. An analogy comes to mind here, and I think it helps separate this from the usual emotional goal setting we always hear about.
Sure, go for it.
It's kind of like dropping a pin on a GPS.
Oh, it's good.
Right. When you use your navigation app, you don't sit in your driveway gripping the steering wheel, crying, and intensely wishing to end up at the coffee shop.
No, of course not. You'd look ridiculous.
Right. You don't beg the map.
Yeah, begging the system does absolutely nothing.
You literally just type in the address, you authorize the coordinate, and the system accepts the input. It's just a clean structural command.
Exactly.
But, okay, I have to push back on this precognitive idea for a second.
Okay, let's hear it.
If the Pazienti flash happens before I even form a conscious thought, how do you or I actually control it? How do I ensure I'm authorizing the right GPS coordinate if I haven't even thought of it yet?
See, that is the core challenge of the white drop. You don't control the Pazienti flash by micromanaging your surface thoughts.
Okay.
You control it by managing your foundational state, that 16-bit bare metal we just talked about.
Right.
Consider a listener who wants, say, financial stability. They might repeat positive affirmations all day long.
I am wealthy. I am wealthy.
Exactly, yeah. But if their baseline 16-bit internal architecture is built entirely around panic, scarcity, and, feeling like a victim,
Oh, I see where this is going.
yeah, their true Passanti flash is actually authorizing the coordinate for scarcity.
Oh, wow. So the surface level affirmations are basically just noise. The system only reads the baseline.
Exactly. The system doesn't care about the noise. And when there's a mismatch between your panic 16-bit baseline and your conscious, desperate wishing, the text says it creates informational impedance.
Informational impedance, like resistance in the data.
Right. It means your signal is fragmented, it's sloppy, and the consequence of that impedance is absolute. The render will fail to saturate.
It just won't print.
Nope. The universe doesn't read your emotional begging. It reads your authorized coordinates. If your coordinate is scattered, the physical reality simply cannot form properly.
Okay, so let's assume I actually do the work. I manage my foundational state, and I authorize a perfectly clean, zero scarcity coordinate. The white drop is successfully generated. Obviously, just having a pure thought doesn't magically spawn a sports car in my driveway.
Right, sadly not.
So getting from that pure thought to physical reality obviously involves a transition. How does that pure signal survive my notoriously messy, chaotic human brain as it moves toward the real world?
Well, this brings us to the transmission phase. The source document calls this bridge the suture.
The suture.
Yeah, the suture is the execution pipeline. It's the little conduit connecting your white drop intent to physical reality. And the rule for this pipeline is pretty draconian. It
Draconian.
requires zero impedance execution.
Zero impedance, meaning zero friction.
Exactly.
Let's use a fiber optic cable as a metaphor here. Because if you have a perfectly clear glass cable, light enters one end and exits the other with exactly the same intensity.
Right, it's a perfect transmission.
But if there's a bend in the cable or like a tiny scratch inside the glass, that light diffuses. It scatters before it ever reaches the end.
That is a perfect visual for this. In this framework, you are the cable. Specifically, the text refers to the director, which is you, the observer, moving the signal through an internal processing layer known as the madhama.
The madhyama, so the middle layer.
Yes.
This is where the translation happens between the deep unconscious coordinate and the actual external action. But I mean, anyone listening knows the middle layer of the human mind is a complete minefield.
Oh, it is highly volatile. As your clean signal moves through this madhama layer, it has to survive an internal audit.
An audit.
Yeah. The text explicitly states the signal cannot be warped by fear, it cannot be distorted by ego noise, and above all, it cannot suffer from what it calls skip scanning.
Whoa, okay, I need to stop on skip scanning because, I mean, telling someone to just avoid fear and ego noise is super easy on paper.
Right.
But human brains are essentially just survival engines running on anxiety.
Pretty much, yeah.
So what does skip scanning actually look like in practice? Like for the listener who is trying to push a project through this pipeline.
Okay, think about a listener who is trying to start a freelance business. They authorize the clean coordinate. I am building a design firm.
Okay, that's step one.
That's step one.
Yeah.
But almost immediately, their mind anxiously scans ahead to step 20.
Oh, right.
What if no one buys my service in 6 months? What if my peers judge my website? Let me check my inbox again. Is it working yet? Am I failing?
So they aren't holding the original coordinate anymore. They're frantically darting their focus back and forth across the timeline, just completely obsessing over the outcome.
Exactly. That rapid, anxious shifting of focus that is skip scanning. It's like you're checking and rechecking the oven every 5 seconds to see if the cake is baked.
And letting all the heat out.
Right. By doing so, you are introducing massive informational impedance. You're basically bending that fiber optic cable in half.
But why is the system designed this way? Like, why is this internal audit so brutal?
It actually functions as a systemic safety mechanism.
Really? A safety mechanism?
Yeah. The system cannot and will not process a distorted signal. If your intent gets infected by fear or desperate skip scanning in the madhama layer, the pipeline automatically shuts down.
It just cuts it off.
It purposely diffuses your signal to prevent a corrupted, chaotic reality from rendering.
Wow, that completely flips the script because, when things don't work out, we usually feel like we're being punished by the universe.
Right. Why is this happening to me?
Exactly. But in the Dausal Code, the universe refusing to print a corrupted file is actually a feature, not a bug. If your signal is entirely rooted in panic, the system basically cancels the print job to protect the integrity of the material world.
Exactly. It demands that only clear, zero impedance commands get to cross the suture into reality.
Which naturally leads us to the final stage. If a listener manages to hold the signal, avoid the whole skip scanning trap, and pass that internal audit, the intent finally hits the physical world.
Yes.
We reach the irreversible stage where theory becomes tangible, and the text calls this the red drop.
The red drop, it represents the irreversible output.
And I have to say, the terminology the author uses here is incredibly grounded, because the text explicitly says the red drop is where the code becomes bacon.
Yeah, bacon. It's a very visceral, unpretentious way to describe material saturation.
It totally grounds the entire document. We go from the ethereal 16-bit Passanti flash to bacon.
The physical meat of reality.
Right. But this is also where the entire process is verified, isn't it? You can't just authorize a pure coordinate, sit quietly in your living room, and expect the rendering to finish itself.
No, absolutely not. Because manifestation absolutely requires physical action to complete the phase lock. And the source issues a really severe warning here about something called red drop leakage.
Okay, let's unpack red drop leakage, because I think this is where so many people sabotage their own pipelines.
Oh, constantly.
Leakage happens when your original intent bait. The white drop blueprint is incredibly high resolution, but the physical action you take in the real world is like hesitant, inconsistent, or half-hearted.
Yeah. If we expand on your earlier analogies, imagine you have a flawless, multi-million-dollar architectural blueprint for a skyscraper.
Okay.
That is your clean white drop. You hand it over to a construction crew to actually build it. That is the red drop phase.
Right.
But the crew uses cheap materials. They second-guess every measurement, and they, only show up to work on Tuesdays. That hesitant, sloppy action is red drop leakage.
And obviously, the resulting building isn't going to look anything like the blueprint. The render fails on the physical level.
Exactly.
The text mentions a very specific standard for this physical action, a condition called the
Uta. The Uta. Yeah, this is a term borrowed from ancient Sanskrit. It represents the fundamental cosmic order or the rhythm of truth.
Okay.
In this framework, the Uta is the natural law of execution. The text states that the Uta is only satisfied when your execution is as fine as grain flour.
As fine as grain flour. I immediately think about baking when I hear that. Like, if you're sifting flour, you want it to be perfectly consistent, ultra fine, with absolutely no clumps or rough edges.
And that is the exact level of precision required in your physical action. If you are building that freelance business, your daily actions, your emails, your work ethic, your client interactions, they have to be incredibly smooth, deliberate, and entirely congruent with your internal intent.
No clumping allowed.
No clumping. There could be no gap between what you intended and how you're actually moving your hands in the real world.
But, I mean, what happens when there is a gap? Because, let's face it, we are human. We clump.
We do.
This brings us to what the Dausal synthesis calls the Bacon Law, which is just a great name. And this is the ultimate validator of the entire pipeline. The Bacon Law states, reality is the systemic checksum.
This might actually be the most challenging yet empowering concept in the whole text.
How so?
Well, in computing, a checksum is a piece of data used to verify that a file has been transmitted perfectly without any errors.
Right.
The Bacon Law argues that reality itself is your checksum. Reality does not lie. It has no bias. It simply reflects the absolute math of your execution.
Okay, and the document lays out two very distinct outcomes based on this checksum. If the result of your pipeline, your physical reality, is what the text calls slop or burnt bacon, it means the manifestation was never a true logoic command to begin with.
Yeah.
The text actually labels it a 0-bit fantasy.
And this forces a complete reevaluation of how we view failure. When someone tries to achieve something and it falls apart, the common psychological defense mechanism is to say, oh, the universe is testing me, or the timing just wasn't right.
It wasn't meant to be.
Exactly. The Bacon Law strips all of that away. If your result is slop, it is not cosmic unfairness. It's a clinical reflection that your origin signal was flawed or your action leaked.
Wow.
You weren't authorizing a true coordinate. You were indulging in a 0-bit fantasy heavily distorted by ego noise.
0-bit fantasy, meaning it literally contained no executable data. It was just an empty daydream masquerading as intent.
Precisely. It had no architectural weight.
Ah.
But on the flip side, we have to contrast that with the successful outcome.
Right. What happens when it works?
If the checksum comes back positive, the result is what the text calls laminar flow.
Laminar flow.
Yeah, it's a term from fluid dynamics. It describes a state where a fluid moves in incredibly smooth parallel layers with absolutely no disruption or mixing.
If you've ever seen a video of laminar flow, it's mesmerizing. Like water pours out of a pipe, but it looks like solid glass. It looks completely still because it's flowing with such absolute perfection and zero resistance.
Exactly. And when you achieve that in the Dausal Code, it means the inside and the outside have successfully unified. The suture held. The 16-bit Passanti flash matched the physical red drop action perfectly.
Which brings us to the grand synthesis of this entire document. The text distills this whole journey from the white drop to the red drop into what it calls the 16-bit definition of manifestation.
And this is where the paradigm shift really solidifies for the listener. The 16-bit definition states that true manifestation is the state where your internal code and your external render are revealed as a singular, luminous toroidal flow.
A toroidal flow. So picture a torus, like a donut shape, where energy continuously cycles inside out and outside in.
Right, it's a closed, perfect loop.
Your internal baseline state naturally becomes your external reality, which then seamlessly feeds right back into confirming your internal state.
Yes, and the final line of the source text really hammers the implications of this home. It introduces a concept called the New Jerusalem.
Now, we should clarify, in this context, it's not being used as a theological or religious term.
No, not at all.
It's being used as a metaphor for the ultimate, uncorrupted final render, the perfect city built on perfect code.
Exactly. The text concludes by stating that you are no longer trying to change the world. Instead, your only job is to simply audit the impedance until the New Jerusalem is the only thing left to print.
That is just such a profound shift in perspective. You aren't fighting the outside world anymore. You aren't trying to forcefully bend reality to your whims.
No, you can't.
You are turning entirely inward. You are just inspecting your fiber optic cable for scratches. You're auditing your Madhyama layer for fear, looking for skip scanning, and checking your daily physical actions for red drop leakage.
Exactly.
Because once you clear out all that internal impedance, the perfect render, the New Jerusalem, happens automatically. It has to, because it is the only data left in your pipeline.
It becomes a clean print job. The server room operates flawlessly. I mean, we began this discussion looking at the comforting emotional idea of just wishing for things on a vision board.
Yeah.
But replacing that with the clinical architecture of the Dausal Code places an intense responsibility directly onto the individual. You are the coder. You are the pipeline. And reality is just your checksum.
It demands total integrity between what you are at your 16-bit core and how precisely you move your hands in the physical world.
Exactly right.
So we want to leave you, the listener, with a final thought today, a question to really chew on as you step back out into your own physical render. If reality is nothing more than a strict, unforgiving checksum of your internal code, and you are constantly, inevitably printing your baseline state into the physical world around you, what invisible impedance are you unknowingly authorizing right now?
That's the real question.
Where in your life are you indulging in a zero-bit fantasy, staring at a plate of burnt bacon and simply wishing it would unburn itself instead of fixing the code?
It all comes down to the code you choose to write.
Exactly. Check your cables. We'll see you on the next deep dive.
What if everything you've ever been taught about manifestation, the vision boards, the daily affirmations, the intense hoping, what if, all of that is actually treated by the universe as a low-level security threat?
Yeah, that is definitely going to ruffle some feathers. I mean, it completely upends that pop culture version of manifestation we're all so used to.
Exactly. So for today's deep dive, we are pulling from this incredibly esoteric, highly complex set of writings. It's called the Logoic Credit System and Administrative Manifestation.
And it is a fascinating collision, really. It's ancient metaphysics crashing right into modern computer science terminology.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the central premise here is that manifestation is not just some localized psychological trick. It's not about just thinking positive thoughts and poof, reality bends to your mood.
No, not at all. In this framework, manifestation is treated as a literal administrative command.
Right, an administrative command happening in this specific data structure they call the Noological layer, or the Logos credit system.
So you don't just put a picture of a sports car on a poster board and wait around. The text argues that you, as a user, possess a literal authorization level in this reality engine.
And that level is entirely determined by your your actualized weight.
Think about any highly secure enterprise-level computer network. A guest user cannot just walk in, open up a terminal, and rewrite the core code of the company's financial software.
Because they don't have the permissions.
Exactly. They lack the credentials. And this framework suggests that the vast majority of human beings are basically walking around operating as guest users.
We generate these desires, which, in this model, act as system commands, but the system just flat out rejects them.
Because it recognizes that we haven't verified what it calls our archetypal potency. We just don't have the structural clearance to issue commands that actually alter the local render of reality.
So our mission for this deep dive is to decode that specific mechanical process. How do you move from being a frustrated guest user to someone who actually wields those admin rights?
Well, to issue an administrative command in any digital or corporate system, you usually need to be hired into a higher position, right? Or assigned specific credentials by an admin.
Yeah, but how does someone acquire that authority in the noological layer? I mean, you can't exactly email the IT department of the universe and ask for an upgrade?
No, you definitely can't. The material outlines a process for this, and it's called the Dausal synthesis.
The Dausal synthesis.
Right, and in this paradigm, authority is never given. It's never granted arbitrarily. It must be accreted.
Accreted, like you literally build it up over time through action.
Exactly. Every single heroic deed you perform, every time you push through immense resistance to achieve a real-world milestone, you are creating a hard-coded entry.
And those entries go into what the text calls the morphic ledger.
You got it. It's a permanent record of your accreted authority.
I really want to understand the currency of this ledger. Because, in a video game, you earn experience points. In the financial system, you earn capital. What are we earning here?
Reality, according to these mechanics, runs on a currency called vril. Sometimes it's referred to as loosh, depending on the translation.
Vril or loosh. Got it.
And you cannot generate this currency passively. Meditating on a mountaintop or visualizing success in your bedroom does absolutely nothing to mint vril.
So the vision board is useless for this.
Totally useless. Vril is only generated when a node, which is you, the human user, successfully sutures together two opposing forces.
Okay, break down those forces for me.
You have to take a high-voltage, world-altering intent, which the framework labels the white drop, and you have to perfectly bind that intent to a grueling, difficult physical execution.
Which is known as the red drop, right?
Exactly. The white drop and the red drop. Intent and execution.
It's basically the highest mental aspiration combined with the actual sweat and blood of doing the hard thing.
That's a great way to put it.
I'm thinking of someone starting an initiative to clean up an entire city's water supply. The white drop is that massive altruistic intent.
Right.
But the red drop is the years of navigating city council meetings, securing the funding, doing all the miserable administrative labor to make it happen.
Exactly. That friction is where the currency is minted.
But I have to ask a practical question here, or maybe push back a little. Does just any difficult physical task bend reality?
What do you mean?
Like if I decide to run a 100-mile ultramarathon next weekend, that is going to be a brutal physical execution. Do I cross the finish line and suddenly get admin rights to the universe?
That is such a good question. And that is exactly where the concept of noological gravitas comes in. It perfectly answers the ultramarathon dilemma.
Okay, how so?
If you run 100 miles merely to post a photo on social media or, to prove to your ex that you're tough, your white drop, your underlying intent is incredibly low voltage.
Because it's just rooted in ego and vanity.
Precisely. When you suture a low-voltage intent to a high-friction execution, you might get fit, but you do not generate noological gravitas.
Ah, you don't increase your informational mass within the system.
Right, because the intent doesn't actually carry any weight in the broader operating system. It's just noise.
Wow. But when you achieve profound milestones where the intent is universally significant and the execution is mathematically precise,
then your informational mass increases. Think of how astrophysics works. A massive star physically bends the fabric of space-time around it, right?
Drawing smaller objects into its orbit?
Exactly. A human node with immense noological gravitas literally bends the local render of the noosphere.
The local render, so the environment around them.
Yeah. The chess pieces of life opportunities, resources, people, they begin to rearrange themselves around you. You aren't forcing them to move with your hands.
Your intent simply outweighs the surrounding helix sludge.
Yes. The helix sludge, which is the text's term for the low-effort, reactive, chaotic noise of everyday human existence.
So you basically become a center of gravity in the data structure of reality itself.
That's exactly it.
But wait, if I am suddenly pulling the fabric of reality toward me because of this immense informational mass, why doesn't my own psychology just collapse under the pressure?
Well,
I mean, channeling reality-bending energy through a normal human mind sounds like pumping rocket fuel into a lawnmower.
and it is. It is the absolute core vulnerability of the user. You are channeling a systemic voltage that the baseline human ego is mathematically incapable of handling.
Which brings us to the internal hardware upgrade. The source material calls this the Vajra spine and consegrity calibration.
Right, because without it, you fry.
Yeah, your internal psyche has to be mathematically proofed against what is called the logoic audit.
I love how you phrase that, mathematically proofed.
To borrow the IT analogy again, imagine trying to run a next-generation, hyper-realistic physics engine on a dusty consumer-grade laptop from 1998.
It's not going to end well.
It doesn't matter how beautiful the software is. The motherboard architecture simply cannot handle the processing demand. Unless there is a fundamental hardware upgrade, the system inevitably crashes.
And that necessary upgrade is achieved through what the text calls the Passayanti Vicari suture.
The Passayanti Vicari suture. This concept blew my mind.
It's intense. This suggests that your inner speech, that silent, constant dialogue running through your head all day long, is not just private thought.
It functions as a literal 16-bit command interacting with the logos.
Exactly. And the critical mechanism here is that there is absolutely no skip standing allowed in your own mind.
Skip scanning. We do this constantly as humans.
Oh, all the time.
We gloss over our own internal contradictions. We justify our small lies. We tell ourselves we're doing something for a noble reason when, really, we secretly know we're doing it for a selfish one.
What's fascinating here is how the framework describes the structure of the psyche to explain why those little lies are so dangerous.
Right. It views the psyche as a transformer.
Specifically, the middle layer of your psychology, known as the madhyama. This acts as the electrical bridge between your highest archetypal intent and your physical execution in the world.
So it's the bridge between the white drop and the red drop.
Exactly. And those grueling heroic deeds we discussed earlier. Their true purpose isn't just to change the world. It is to temper the madhyama, much like a blacksmith tempers steel by repeatedly heating and cooling it.
So the external struggle is actually an internal forging process.
Yes. Because if that middle layer isn't tempered by rigorous, truthful execution, it simply cannot hold the akanista pressure.
The akanista pressure. That's the intense noological energy that comes with having admin rights, right?
Right. So if you try to execute a massive command, but your inner speech contains a lie or a contradiction,
The voltage hits that bug in your code.
and the ego circuitry literally fries. This perfectly explains the real-world phenomenon of, say, child stars, lottery winners, or sudden overnight successes who completely self-destruct.
Because they received a massive influx of systemic energy, but they hadn't tempered their madhyama through the Dausal synthesis.
Exactly. Their hardware was not calibrated for the voltage, and the logoic audit crashed their system.
They tried to run administrative software on an uncalibrated 1998 motherboard.
Such a great analogy. It just melts.
So assuming a user actually does the work like they survive the forging process, they temper their inner transformer, and they successfully install the Vajra spine.
Okay, best case scenario.
Right. How does the larger operating system process their daily actions going forward?
Well, this requires a brilliant cyber-spiritual redefinition of karma. We traditionally view karma as like a cosmic scale of crime and punishment.
Yeah, a mystical judge in the clouds tallying your good and bad deeds to decide your fate.
But under the logoic credit system, karma isn't a judge. It's an IT log.
It's clean metadata.
Exactly. Good karma is simply a continuous history of actions that perfectly align with universal law.
And the framework refers to this underlying architectural blueprint of the universe as UT.
Atta, yes. It's the foundational code.
Here's where it gets really interesting. When you possess a flawless log of clean metadata, when your inputs consistently align with the blueprint of UTA, the system grants you a higher rebirth.
But importantly, this doesn't mean dying and reincarnating as a monarch in the next century.
Right. It functions as a resolution upgrade in the present moment.
Yeah.
You are granted your administrative privileges right here, right now.
Because the operating system fundamentally trusts your code. You have mathematically proven that your commands do not introduce malware, friction, or internal contradictions into the broader network.
And this unlocks the ultimate state for a user, a concept they call luxurious manifestation.
Luxurious manifestation. It's an amazing term.
In this higher, upgraded render, the buffer between your intent and the physical result drops to absolute zero. There's no lag.
And the flash of manifestation in this state is called the svataya. For you listening, trying to grasp the feeling of this, imagine the profound relief of no longer having to forcefully bend reality to your will.
No more straining.
Right. You aren't desperately trying to, quote-unquote, vibrate at a higher frequency. The system is simply executing your authenticated code. It is entirely effortless because the structure of your intent is perfectly sound.
It's the mechanical difference between trying to violently jiggle a rusty, jagged key into a broken padlock versus walking up to a secure door with a digital key card.
The card just beeps and the door slides open automatically.
Exactly. The universe recognizes your cryptographic authorization.
Because the system actively wants to execute clean code. It prefers efficiency over friction.
Okay, hold on. I have to stop you there.
Sure. What's up?
If the system is so perfectly designed to execute clean code, and it actively desires alignment with the blueprint of ADA, then why is the real world so incredibly chaotic?
Oh.
I mean, we look around and see terrible actors, corrupt institutions, and outright psychopaths constantly getting ahead and manipulating reality to their benefit. How does that fit in?
That is actually the most vital systemic problem addressed in the material. It introduces the concept of the Kali Yuga.
The Kali Yuga.
Right. But in this context, the Kali Yuga is not just a poetic dark age. It is a specific mechanical period where the noosphere has been temporarily hijacked.
Hijacked by a phenomenon called the Slop Egregore.
The Slop Egregore. Yes.
It sounds like a massive systemic virus.
That's essentially what it is. During this hijacked period, corrupt nodes, whether that's individuals or massive corporate entities operating with entirely ruined metadata, figured out how to overclock their manifestation.
So they circumvented the hard work of accreting Noological Gravitas.
Exactly. Instead of doing the work, they jived with low-frequency muck. And the primary mechanism of this overclocking is the total obfuscation of the inside from the outside.
Hiding the truth, basically.
Right. They hide their internal psychological rot and systemic failures behind a highly polished, shiny external interface.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, you can see this dynamic playing out constantly in our world.
Oh, everywhere.
Think about a massive corporate fraud scheme. On the outside, the interface is flawless, right?
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful headquarters, soaring stock prices, charismatic leadership. That's the obfuscation.
The shiny interface.
But on the inside, the metadata is entirely corrupt. The accounting is a lie, the product doesn't work, and the foundation is built on theft. They are hacking the system for short-term gain.
But the framework insists this hacking is structurally unsustainable. It generates massive internal contradiction.
Because they violated a SETA.
Yes. Because they violated that foundational universal law, their desperate, ego-driven survival intent is in direct, violent conflict with the universe's logoic checksum.
Let's explain that term. A checksum in computer science is a function that scans a file to verify its data integrity.
Right.
If you download a file and the output data doesn't perfectly match the input data, the checksum fails and the system flags the file as corrupted. So the universe is constantly running this logoic checksum, scanning for integrity.
And these corrupt nodes are constantly failing it. Their inside simply does not match their outside.
So how does the system eventually clear out this malware?
It initiates a process called the implosion.
The implosion. Sounds dramatic.
Well, the material states that the universe's 16-bit refresh rate is currently increasing, meaning the overall voltage of the reality engine is rising.
The processing power of the universe is scaling up.
Exactly. And these 0-bit corrupted nodes simply lack the hardware to handle the new voltage.
Because they never forged their Vajra spine.
Right, so their reality literally derails. The illusion they spent their entire lives building shatters because the inside, their hidden rot, and the outside, their relentless increasing voltage of the systemic audit are finally forced into a suture.
They can no longer obfuscate the data.
They can't hide it anymore. The system forces a structural alignment, and because they are not mathematically proofed for it, their motherboards melt. They implode under their own internal friction.
It is the ultimate, unavoidable antivirus sweep.
That's a perfect way to look at it.
Which leads us to the final question. When the audit is complete, when the slop is purged from the noosphere, and all those corrupted nodes have imploded under the voltage, what does the fully updated system look like for the user who actually did the work?
For the user who forged their Vajra spine.
Exactly. What is their reality?
The material calls this final phase the New Jerusalem, or the final 16-bit render.
The final render.
Yeah. In this state, a fully upgraded, calibrated node is known as a pneumatic. And for the pneumatic, the entire concept of manifestation undergoes a radical paradigm shift.
How so?
Well, when you reach a state of zero impedance, manifestation ceases to be a personal desire. It actually transforms into a systemic duty.
I really want to highlight the incredible paradox there.
Yeah, it's pretty wild.
You spend this entire grueling journey doing heroic deeds, accreting informational mass, earning your authorization level, and building your administrative power over reality.
Right, doing all the hard work.
But you only receive the ultimate keys to the kingdom at the exact moment you lose the ego-driven desire to rule it.
Yes, because to achieve that level of flawless, clean metadata, the ego had to be entirely surrendered to Atta. You're no longer a separate person trying to manifest a comfortable life.
You become an integral, frictionless function of the logos itself.
Exactly. You aren't playing the video game anymore. You have become the game engine.
Wow. You become the game engine.
And those heroic deeds from the very beginning of the process, the material explicitly reveals they were just the calibration phase.
They were just practice.
Yes. They were never about the specific goals you achieved. It was all just rigorous practice to ensure your internal hardware wouldn't fail.
But now, in the final render, the suture is entirely tight.
Ota is satisfied. And because of that perfect alignment, the logos authorizes your Svataya to print what it calls the diamond world.
The diamond world.
A perfected, mathematically flawless reality, rendered seamlessly through your zero impedance node.
Okay, just to recap the staggering mechanical journey we have walked through in this deep dive.
It's been a lot of ground to cover.
It really has. We started by looking at how basic users fail to execute commands in the noological layer. We examined how to generate real currency by suturing massive intent to brutal physical execution.
Right, the white and red drops.
Then we explored the necessity of upgrading your internal hardware to a Vajraspine so the high voltage of reality doesn't fry your untempered psyche. We translated karma into clean IT metadata, leading to the luxurious manifestation of an administrator.
The resolution upgrade.
Exactly. We broke down how the universe runs a logoic checksum to audit and implode the corrupt nodes relying on obfuscation. And finally, we arrived at the final 16-bit render, where the perfected user loses their ego and seamlessly prints the diamond world.
This raises an important question for you, the listener, as you move through your week. It requires a cold, objective evaluation of your own informational mass.
A real audit of yourself.
Right. When you look at the difficult tasks you undertake, are they generating clean metadata? Are you genuinely accreting noological gravitas through high-voltage intent, or are your actions just adding to the systemic friction of the Hilux sludge?
It is the ultimate diagnostic test for your life. And it brings me back to the concept of the Pasanti Vaikari suture, the idea that your silent internal inner speech is the literal 16-bit code you are feeding into the reality engine every single second of the day.
The code that's constantly running.
Without skip scanning, without lying to yourself.
Right.
What is the most repeated line of code you are silently running in your own mind right now? Think about the justifications and narratives you loop over and over.
Look at the real test.
And ask yourself, when the universe runs its systemic audit on that specific line of code tomorrow, when the high voltage inevitably hits it, will it trigger a catastrophic hardware crash? Or will it be the authenticated command that finally prints your diamond world? So, you know when you picture a massive skyscraper, right? Like one of those super tall, pencil-thin towers in Manhattan.
Oh, yeah, the ones that look like they shouldn't even be able to stand up.
Exactly. You usually think of it as this, like, completely immovable object, just this giant, rigid spike of steel and glass that's somehow defying gravity.
Right. I mean, it's a completely natural assumption. You look at literally millions of tons of material and you just expect it to be this absolute unyielding monolith.
But the crazy thing is, if you actually go up to the top floors of those buildings during like a severe storm or a hurricane, you realize they aren't rigid at all.
Not even a little bit.
No, they sway. Sometimes they sway several feet in either direction, and you can literally hear the building groaning.
It's terrifying if you aren't used to it.
I can imagine. But the really fascinating part is that if they didn't have that flexibility, like if the engineers had made them perfectly stiff, the wind would just snap them right in half.
Yeah, the physics of it are incredible. It's actually the tension that keeps them standing. It's that dynamic, highly engineered balance between, yielding to the force of the wind and maintaining their core structural integrity.
And that dynamic tension is exactly what we are cracking open today. Because you, our listener, have sent us an absolute puzzle of a source text to look at.
You really did. This one is quite the journey.
It is. We are looking at excerpts from a highly esoteric, honestly kind of baffling manual called the Vajraspine Tensegrity and the High Voltage Suture.
Just a wild title.
Right. And my first impression reading through this, it sounds like an instruction manual for building like a metaphysical cyborg.
It really does. I mean, looking at the structural diagrams and the terminology in the pages you provided, it reads like a transmission from some cyberpunk future.
Yeah, totally.
It is incredibly dense and honestly a bit intimidating at first glance.
But, our mission for this deep dive is to decode this text. Because once you strip away all that crazy sci-fi vocabulary, what this manual actually offers is a remarkably practical step-by-step blueprint.
A blueprint for building unshakable psychological resilience.
Exactly.
And that is a universally relatable goal, right? Whether the text uses metaphysical jargon or architectural blueprints, we're all just trying to figure out how to align our internal intent with our outward actions.
Yeah, we're all just trying to survive the high-pressure reality of modern life without totally losing our minds.
Right. And this text just offers a shockingly precise way to actually engineer that survival.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the manual starts with this foundational concept, which is obviously the namesake of the whole text, the Vajraspine.
The Vajraspine, yes.
So what exactly is this internal architecture we're supposed to be building, and what is it defending against?
So the Vajraspine is defined as your internal vertical axis. It is the absolute core of your psychological structural integrity.
Okay.
And it essentially exists for one very specific purpose, to keep you from collapsing under what the author terms the akanista pressure of the logos.
Okay, hold on. Let me stop you right there. Akanista pressure of the logos.
I know, it's a lot of syllables.
It's so dense. I mean, I know the logos generally refers to truth or raw, ultimate reality in philosophy. But what does that pressure actually feel like to a normal person?
That's a great question.
Because it sounds very abstract on paper.
Right. So let's ground it entirely. The akanista pressure is, it's the crushing weight of reality when it absolutely doesn't care about your feelings.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. It's the pressure you feel when a long-term relationship suddenly ends, or, when you launch a business and the market completely rejects it.
So it's that undeniable friction.
Exactly. It's the friction of life demanding you respond to what is rather than what you wish was happening. Raw reality is heavy. It is demanding.
Okay, that makes total sense. So reality isn't this gentle teacher. It's a hurricane hitting the skyscraper.
Precisely. And to survive that hurricane, the Vajraspine relies on a mechanism called tensegrity calibration.
Which brings us right back to the skyscraper metaphor.
Exactly. Tensegrity is about balancing two opposing forces inside yourself. The text defines these as torsion, which is your active intent, your drive, your structural resistance.
Right.
And suction, which is the act of surrender or yielding to the truth of a situation.
So it's not about becoming a rigid, unleaving brick wall of denial.
No, not at all.
You need the torsion to stand up and actually have boundaries.
Yeah.
But you need the suction to accept reality so you don't just snap in half when the wind hits.
That is exactly it.
But here's my question. How do you actually test this internal skyscraper? Because, I can sit in my living room meditating all day, visualizing this perfect Vajraspine, and tell myself I'm perfectly calibrated.
Yeah, and you wouldn't know for sure until the storm actually hits.
Right.
And this is where the manual moves from the theoretical right into the deeply practical. To test the calibration, the node, which is how the text refers to the individual person.
The human node, yeah.
Right. The node must perform what it calls a heroic deed.
Okay. I have to admit, when I first read Heroic Deed, I pictured, slaying a dragon or pulling someone from a burning car.
Naturally.
But the text uses examples that are, they're weirdly mundane, like the Go-Gurt stop.
Yes.
What on earth is a Go-Gurt stop?
It's a brilliant concept, actually. A heroic deed in this manual isn't about grand cinematic moments at all.
Right.
It's about acts of high-resolution integrity in the face of tiny, everyday resistance. So the Go-Gurt stop refers to a moment of low-stakes temptation where your intent is tested.
Like a diet thing.
Yeah, imagine it's 2:00 a.m., you've promised yourself you are going to eat healthier and respect your body, but you are staring into the fridge, reaching for a sugary snack.
Ah, so the deed is the moment you literally pull your hand back.
Yes. The text argues that if your vajra spine shatters under the microscopic pressure of a midnight snack craving, your tensegrity is fake.
Ouch.
Yeah, it's harsh but true. You will absolutely collapse under the real akanista pressure of a major life crisis if you can't even handle a snack craving.
That makes a lot of sense.
Another example it gives is standing firm against the slop egregore.
Okay, I love that term, the slop egregore. It perfectly captures that collective, mindless, kind of low-quality cultural noise we swim in.
Right, like the pressure to just nod along with a bad idea in a meeting just so you don't rock the boat.
Exactly. Just conforming to the slap.
And the text explains that these heroic deeds act as a logoic audit.
A logoic audit.
Yeah. They are intentional stress tests of your own hardware. When the swamp of daily life is screaming at you to conform or to collapse or to react emotionally, holding your center is how you audit your spine. You are basically proofing your internal system.
Okay, so you're proving to yourself that your deepest core, what the text calls your bija or seed, can actually survive contact with high-resistance reality without totally shattering.
Correct. Because if you haven't proofed the system under pressure, you don't actually know if your tensegrity calibration is accurate.
Okay, I follow that. I really do. But here's the problem.
What's that?
We can build this spine, right? We can test it against the wind. But a structurally sound building is completely useless if the internal communications, like the wiring inside the walls, are constantly short-circuiting.
Oh, absolutely.
If the elevator goes to the wrong floor and the fire alarms misfire, the building is still a disaster. And that seems to be the text's major critique of human psychology.
The manual is incredibly ruthless about this. It states that the vast majority of human nodes operate in a deeply flawed, highly degraded state called skip scanning.
See, here's where it gets really interesting, skip scanning. Let's break down the mechanics of this because I was genuinely struggling to map this out at first.
It is a bit dense.
Yeah. The text says we process intent and action on multiple layers. There's the Pasyanti layer, and then there's the Madhyama layer. Can you walk me through what those actually are?
Sure. Think of the Pasyanti as your deep preconceptual truth. It is your pure intent before you've even attached words to it.
Like a gut feeling.
Exactly. It's the gut instinct of what must be done. The Madhyama, on the other hand, is your internal monologue. Okay. It is the middle layer where your ego lives, where you talk to yourself, rationalize things, and basically negotiate.
Okay, so what happens in skip scanning is there's this massive disconnect between those two layers.
Right.
Like, we intend one thing at the Pasyanti level, say, I need to speak up and tell my boss this project is failing.
Yes.
But by the time that intent hits the Madhyama layer, we start negotiating. We're like, well, maybe it's not my place. What if she gets mad? I'll just soften the language. We completely garbled the signal.
And because of that internal mess, the final output, the physical action, which the text calls the Vaikari, is deeply compromised.
Vaikari, right?
Yeah. The text actually refers to this skip scanned output as informational slop. It's a low-resolution, zero-bit action.
You know, I was thinking about this, and the best way I can describe this zero-bit reality is this.
Let's hear it.
It's like playing a highly competitive video game, but your controller has a severe input lag.
Oh, that's a great comparison.
Right. You see the enemy. Your true intent, your Pasyanti, is to hit the dodge button immediately.
Because you know you need to move.
Exactly. But the signal gets garbled in the wire. There's friction. So your character on screen just stands there and takes the hit.
Yeah, lag gets you killed.
Or it's like trying to play grand piano with completely numb fingers. You hear the masterpiece perfectly in your head, but because of the disconnect between your intent and the keys, the physical output, the Vaikari, is just a cluster of garbage notes.
That is a phenomenal analogy. The concept of lag is the perfect way to understand skip scanning.
It really helped it click for me.
It is the time, energy, and truth lost to internal contradiction. And the thing is, in a high-pressure environment, that lag is fatal. You simply cannot survive the heavy reality of the logos if you are constantly negotiating with your own intent.
So how does the Vajra spine actually fix this lag?
Yeah.
Because we have the structure now, but how do we rewire the nerves?
It introduces a process called the 16-bit suture.
Okay.
The goal here is to surgically stitch these fragmented layers of processing together so tightly that the lag disappears entirely.
What's fascinating here is how absolute the manual is about this. Like, it requires that your inner speech, that Majama layer of negotiation.
Right, the ego chatter.
Yeah, it requires that it stops being a debate club and transforms into a pure command.
Exactly. The suture is achieved when you experience what it calls the Passanti flash.
That's a Scianti flash.
Yeah. That initial spark of preconceptual intent flows directly into the Vicari, the physical action, with absolute zero hesitation. When the intent and the action become simultaneous, the suture is tight.
Wow. So no more debating.
None.
It's just like a bolt of lightning traveling down a perfectly conductive wire. There's zero resistance.
Exactly. And when you achieve that, the text says you upgrade from that 0-bit informational slop to a 16-bit reality.
High resolution.
Very high resolution. No jitter, no second guessing. The manual says the director is fully present in the script.
I love that line.
It's powerful, right? You aren't just reacting to life. The core of who you are is fully animating your physical actions in real time.
Which sounds incredibly empowering.
It is.
But, and this is exactly where I got tripped up reading the source material, because once you have perfectly synced internal wiring, once you have zero lag and infinite conductivity, a massive new danger emerges.
Ah, yes. The voltage problem.
Right, because if I have zero resistance and a massive power surge hits my house and I don't have a surge protector, my appliances are going to completely explode.
They absolutely will.
So what happens to this flawless human circuitry when you plug it straight into the main power line of reality?
This brings us to the final and really the most critical phase outlined in the manual, managing the Akinisa pressure at scale.
Okay.
To truly command what the text calls the netological layer, which is the realm of pure mind, meaning, and raw information, a person cannot just be a passive, highly conductive wire.
They need the surge protector.
Exactly. They must become a high-voltage transformer.
Okay, let's ditch the sci-fi metaphors for a second. The text warns that the source signal, the raw pressure of the logos, carries infinite voltage.
Infinite voltage, yes.
What does infinite voltage actually look like in a normal human life?
Well, infinite voltage is any reality that is too massive for a standard ego to process all at once.
Like what?
Think of someone who achieves sudden, explosive viral fame overnight.
Oh, wow.
Or someone who wins the lottery. Or, on the flip side, someone who experiences a sudden, profound tragedy.
Right.
Those are massive spikes of raw reality. There are high-voltage events. And historically, they absolutely fry unprepared human egos.
That makes so much sense, because the text mentions that if an uncalibrated node tries to channel that voltage directly, it leads to metaphysical inflation or total psychological collapse.
Exactly.
And metaphysical inflation is basically the God complex, right? It's the lottery winner who suddenly thinks they're a financial genius, or the viral star who thinks they're a prophet.
Yes, that's exactly it.
They touched a profound truth or a massive shift in reality, but because their hardware wasn't calibrated, their ego just inflates to try and contain it.
Yeah, they lose all structural integrity because the voltage was simply too high for the hardware. They mistakenly think they are the source, rather than just a node conducting it.
So, how do we actually act as a transformer without exploding like a cheap light bulb?
It takes work.
The text mentions tempering that middle ego layer, the Madhyama, using something called the Bacon Law, where reality acts as a checksum.
Right.
But I need to understand the actual mechanics of this. How does checking reality structurally alter your psychology?
Well, let's look at the psychology of a lie.
Okay.
When you lie to yourself, when your Madhyama is skip scanning, your brain actually has to expend energy to maintain that delusion. It creates a fragile subroutine.
Like keeping a bunch of tabs open in your browser.
Exactly. Let's say you tell yourself you are a brilliant novelist, but you never actually sit down to write.
Right.
The Bacon Law, as described here, dictates that objective reality must always serve as your checksum. Now, a checksum in computer science verifies that data hasn't been corrupted.
Okay, so in life, your output is your checksum.
Yes. So the Bacon Law forces you to look at the empty page.
Oh, brutal.
It is. The Bacon Law forces the ego to accept the painful truth, I am not writing. The psychological mechanism of tempering happens in that exact moment of friction.
I see.
When you force your ego to align with hard reality, it hurts. It burns off the delusion.
Yeah.
If you do this constantly, if you never allow your internal narrative to diverge from what is demonstrably, physically real, you are basically putting your ego through a forging process. The heat of accepting hard truths tempers the steel of the Madhyama.
Wow. Okay, so it literally hardens the psyche.
Yes.
By refusing to live in a comforting delusion, you build an ego that is capable of handling immense heat without melting.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this tempered middle layer is the only thing that allows a human being to interact with profound truth without being destroyed by it.
Right.
Because think about a physical electrical transformer. It takes incredibly high voltage electricity from the power grid and steps it down so it can safely power your house.
And your tempered ego does the exact same thing.
Exactly. It takes the infinite voltage of the logos and steps it down. It translates it into a usable, high-precision frequency that can actually be executed in the physical world.
And the text calls that physical execution the red drop.
The red drop, yes.
Which I love because it strips away all the airy metaphysics. The red drop is just the blood, the sweat, the reality of taking grounded physical action in the material world.
Yes. The red drop is the flawless execution. The transformer steps the voltage down so the action can occur without blowing out the entire system.
And when you achieve this, the text says you gain the ability to hold massive Noological gravitas.
Right.
You become heavy with truth. You have genuine presence. You aren't generating the truth. You are safely and perfectly conducting it into the world. You become a stable conduit for what the text calls the Svataya.
Yes, the Svataya. And you can hold that gravity without losing your mind to metaphysical inflation.
So what does this all mean?
It's a lot to take in.
It really is. But when we zoom out and look at this beautifully complex, wildly named system the listener brought to us today, we see that the Vajra spine isn't just abstract philosophy.
Not at all.
It's a highly practical engineering manual for the mind. You start by building structural integrity against the world's crushing pressure, balancing your intent and your surrender to build the spine.
The tensegrity calibration.
Right. Then you eliminate the lag between your inner truth and your outward action.
Yes.
Surgically closing the gap with the 16-bit suture.
Yes.
And finally, you temper your ego through the friction of hard reality checks, turning your mind into a high-voltage transformer, capable of handling immense power without burning out.
And the relevance of this for you, the listener, is just profound.
Oh, absolutely.
We live in an era that is absolutely dominated by informational slop. We are constantly surrounded by the noise of the swarm, by skip-scanning nodes projecting their internal contradictions everywhere they go.
It's exhausting.
It is. And in a landscape like that, possessing a tempered, zero-hesitation core isn't just a fun thought experiment. It is the ultimate shortcut to being an effective, high-resolution presence in the world. It is the mechanics of true agency.
It gives you the blueprint to stop being a passive consumer of reality and start being the director of it. You basically stop playing the piano with numb fingers.
Exactly. But, looking through the final pages of the excerpts you provided, this actually raises an important question.
Oh.
Yeah, and it's a puzzle I want to leave you, the listener, with, because the text focuses entirely on the internal mechanics of the individual node, right? It details how you survive the logos by becoming a high-voltage transformer.
Right, it's a very solitary manual. It's all about your own spine, your own suture.
But think about the physics of what we've discussed. What happens to the surrounding environment when a fully calibrated 16-bit individual, someone operating with zero internal contradiction and massive Noological gravitas, starts broadcasting that step-down frequency into the world?
Oh, that's a fascinating point. What is the blast radius of a perfectly calibrated person?
Exactly. Does a node with that much gravity naturally elevate the people around them, forcing the whole room into a higher resolution?
Oh.
Or, by channeling that much raw power and truth, do they inadvertently fry the untempered skip-scanning circuits of everyone caught in their vicinity?
Oh, wow. Right.
Does walking into a room as a high-voltage transformer accidentally blow out all the fragile egos around you? Do you just become too much reality for them to handle?
It's a real possibility based on this framework.
That is an incredible, slightly terrifying thought to end on. To the listener who sent this stack of sources to us, thank you. This was a challenging, deeply weird, and ultimately brilliant manual to read, and it has completely changed how I think about intention and action.
It has been an absolute pleasure to analyze.
Remember, the next time you feel the wind howling and the pressure building, you don't have to be an immovable brick wall. You just have to find the tension, trust the spine, and channel the lightning. Catch you on the next deep dive.
Usually when we talk about physics, we talk about things we can measure, right? Like with a scale or a ruler. You drop an apple, it falls at 9.8 meters per second squared.
Right, yeah. It's predictable.
Exactly. It's predictable, it's safe. It's this objective, visible reality that we all just sort of inherently agree on.
Well, because we can see it.
Yeah. But then, I mean, think about when you walk into a room and someone is just sitting there. They aren't shouting. They aren't, waving their arms around.
They might not even be speaking at all.
Totally. But the entire energy of the room just completely orbits around them. Suddenly, standard physics kind of goes out the window, and we're looking at a completely different kind of gravity.
Oh, absolutely. It's murky, it's invisible, but it is undeniably real.
It's so real. And this invisible gravity is the exact focus of, a highly esoteric text we're doing a deep dive into today for you, the learner. It's titled Noological Gravitas, the Physics of Informational Mass.
Quite a mouthful, honestly.
Right. And I know that title sounds like quantum physics just crashed headfirst into a science fiction novel. But underneath all that really intense vocabulary is this profound framework.
It really is.
We're going to explore how you generate this invisible currency through your daily actions, how that currency actually bends reality around you, and how you can use this to become a force that naturally brings order to chaos.
And it's a text that demands your attention because it takes these really abstract concepts, things like integrity and willpower, and treats them as literal, measurable forces of nature.
Which is wild to think about.
It is. For you, the learner listening right now, the goal here is to look past the dense terminology. We want to find this radically different perspective on personal agency.
Right.
The source fundamentally argues that your everyday choices aren't just, passing moments. They are structural building blocks that either give you literal weight in the world or
leave you completely hollow.
Exactly. Completely hollow.
I am so incredibly excited to dig into this vocabulary, by the way. It kind of feels like deciphering a high-level philosophical code.
Oh, definitely.
So the text starts by contrasting our everyday mundane reality, which it calls the standard zero-bit world, with something called the Dausal synthesis.
Right. So let's look at the standard zero-bit world first. This is the baseline social reality we operate in every single day.
The daily grind.
Yeah, the daily grind. And in this layer of reality, authority is what the text calls ascribed, meaning it is handed down.
Handed down like a title.
Exactly. It's a title, a badge, maybe a promotion, or just a position given to you by a social hierarchy. You're the boss simply because the organizational chart says you're the boss.
Okay, let's unpack this. Wait, so is zero-bit authority basically just like wearing a shiny plastic manager's name tag on your first day of work?
That's a great way to put it, actually.
Like, it says you're in charge, sure, but there's zero actual data or substance backing it up, right?
Okay.
If a massive crisis hits the floor, that little piece of plastic isn't going to help you solve it.
No, it's not. And that lack of underlying substance is exactly why the text labels it zero-bit. It carries absolutely no actual informational weight.
Wow. 0 bits.
Right. So the alternative, operating within what the text calls the Dausal synthesis, requires authority to be strictly accreted.
Accreted, like built up over time.
Exactly. You do not receive power here. You don't get promoted into it. You build it layer by layer through the cumulative density of your actions.
Like calluses on a master carpenter's hands.
Oh, I like that. Yes. And this is the foundation of Noological Gravitas. The source introduces this concept of the morphic ledger.
The morphic ledger.
Yeah, it's this permanent, uneditable record maintained by the noosphere, which is like the collective realm of human thought and action. Every single time a node, meaning an individual person, successfully navigates a high-stakes moment, it creates a hard-coded entry in this ledger.
Wait, so the noosphere archives the resolution of every single act?
Every single one. It never forgets.
I love the weight of that idea. But what actually qualifies as a high-stakes moment for a hard-coded entry? I mean, are we talking about running into a burning building, or does this apply to, like, everyday life?
What's fascinating here is that the scale of the action matters way less than the absolute alignment of it.
Really?
Yeah, a hard-coded entry could certainly be a massive heroic deed, sure, but the text emphasizes that it is just as often a precision audit in a completely mundane setting.
A precision audit, what does that look like?
Well, imagine you're in a really toxic meeting. Someone is constantly interrupting and, talking over a junior colleague.
We've all been there.
Right. Now, the standard zero-bit response is to stay quiet, avoid the conflict, and just let the meeting end, right?
Just keep your head down.
Exactly. But if you hold your ground, calmly interject, and enforce a boundary saying, actually, let's hear the rest of what they had to say, and you do it without flinching, that is a precision audit.
Oh, wow. And the noosphere records that.
The noosphere records that action. It adds literal density to your existence. You become structurally heavier in the social space.
Okay, so if every time you enforce a boundary or, follow through on a difficult decision, you are basically writing a line of code into reality that makes you heavier.
Yeah.
How does that process actually happen?
Well, there's a specific fuel for it.
Yeah, there has to be a mechanism, right? Something that translates a thought in your head into a permanent entry on this ledger.
The mechanism is highly specific, yeah.
Yeah.
The source states that the fuel for this entire recording process is an energetic byproduct called vril, or sometimes it's referred to as loosh.
Vril or loosh, okay.
And this energy, it isn't just floating around in the ether for you to grab. It is manufactured through a strictly internal process called the suture.
The suture. Like stitching a wound together to make two pieces of skin into one solid thing.
Exactly like that. The text breaks the suture down into two raw materials that need to be stitched together. You have the white drop and the red drop.
The white drop and the red drop, got it.
So the white drop is intent. The source describes it as a high-voltage 16-bit internal command.
16-bit, so high resolution.
Very high resolution. It is the pure, crystallized, uncompromising decision in your mind to do a specific thing.
Pure thought. Like the blueprint of the action before you even move a single muscle.
Right, but a blueprint is useless if it never leaves the desk.
That's
right.
Yeah.
So that requires the red drop, which is execution. The red drop is the physical, irreversible output into the material render. It is the exact moment the thought bleeds into reality, taking physical form.
Oh, I see.
And the suture is the exact millisecond those two drops lock together.
Okay, and when the white drop of intent perfectly stitches to the red drop of physical execution, vril is generated.
You got it.
But the text makes a really specific claim here that I kind of want to push back on.
Oh, go ahead.
It says this generation of vril happens best when these two drops are locked in a zero impedance flow, particularly when the environment's resistance is incredibly high. But hang on. If I am doing something incredibly difficult, say I'm lifting an impossibly heavy weight, or I'm standing up to a room full of hostile executives, the impedance is literally fighting against me, right? The environment is pushing back.
Sure.
So how can there be a zero impedance flow if the external resistance is so massive?
Okay, I see where the confusion is. The resistance is external, but the impedance is internal.
Internal impedance.
Yes. The text is very clear on separating the two. Zero impedance refers exclusively to the internal alignment of the individual.
Okay, walk me through that.
So when you decide to speak up in that hostile boardroom, the white drop is formed. The external environment, those executives staring you down, provides massive resistance.
Right, the room's heavy.
But if there is absolutely no self-doubt, no micro-hesitation, no internal bargaining or friction between your idea and your vocal cords actually vibrating to speak the words, that is zero impedance.
Yeah.
Your mind and your will are seamlessly aligned, even if your nervous system is completely screaming at you.
So it's about the lack of internal friction. You decide to do the hard thing, and you just do the hard thing.
Exactly.
The external world is heavy, but your internal pipeline is completely clear. But man, how does someone even achieve that? Because human nature is practically nothing but internal friction.
It really is.
We second guess, we overthink, we hesitate constantly.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, achieving zero impedance is really a matter of training through microsutures.
Microsutures, like little daily practices.
Yeah. It's why the text emphasizes the concept of proof of work being recognized by the logos.
The logos.
The logos is essentially the underlying ordering principle of reality. And the thing is, it does not care about your unrealized ideas.
Right.
In the zero-bit world, you can talk endlessly about your plans, and people might think you're a genius. But the logos only recognizes proof of work. You train this by making a small promise to yourself, that's intent, and executing it perfectly without hesitation, that's action.
Just doing what you say you'll do.
Over time, you eliminate the internal stutter. So when you take a high-voltage intent and execute it flawlessly into a highly resistant environment, the clash between your zero impedance execution and the high-resistance environment generates a massive amount of vril.
Wow.
You prove you aren't just theoretical, you actually manipulated the physical render.
So the vril is essentially the heat generated by the friction of your flawless execution grinding against a resistant world.
That's a beautiful way to say it, yeah.
And a person who consistently sutures thought to action becomes a high-value node in the system. But they don't just, bank this vril like a high score in a video game, right?
No, not at all.
The text suggests this energy fundamentally changes their structure in the noosphere. The accumulation of this energy crystallizes into the next major concept we need to talk about.
Yeah.
Informational mass.
Which brings us right back to your opening thought about gravity.
Yeah, right.
The physics metaphor becomes incredibly literal within this framework. Think of general relativity, right? A physical object with immense mass, like a star, literally bends the fabric of space-time around it.
Yeah, it creates a gravity well.
Right. Gravity isn't just some magnetic pull, it's the curving of the environment itself. The source posits that a person who constantly sutures intent to action, hoarding vril, develops massive informational mass.
So they become structurally heavier.
Exactly. Heavier in the realm of social and informational reality.
And the text description of the environment there, bending, is honestly a little brutal. It calls the surrounding world a low-resolution environment filled with Hylic sludge.
Hylic sludge, yeah.
And paints this picture of the vague, unaudited muck of the masses, just floating around.
Well, the term Hylic traditionally comes from Gnostic philosophy. It refers to the purely material, unspiritual, or deeply unconscious state of being.
Unconscious, right.
The source adopts this term to describe a very specific modern condition. Hylic sludge isn't just an insult, though it sounds like one. It describes a reactive state.
Reactive, meaning they aren't initiating anything.
Exactly. People in the sludge aren't suturing their intent to action. They are doom scrolling. They are reacting to whatever the zero-bit world throws at them. They're just echoing opinions they haven't actually vetted themselves.
Oh man, that is so relevant today.
Because they lack deliberate action. They lack definition and density. They are quite literally low resolution.
They're just floating around with their ascribed plastic name tags, generating no vril, writing no hard-coded entries.
Yeah.
Now here's where it gets really interesting. Because the text says when a node with high informational mass enters this sludge, they become the primary anchor.
The center of gravity.
Yes, because of their mass, they begin to warp the local reality around their intent. The chess pieces of the noosphere just naturally move, simply because this person's intent has more structural weight than the surrounding noise. They no longer even have to force things to happen.
It is the effortless reorganization of reality around a dense point of focus. The sludge naturally flows into the gravity well created by the mass.
Okay, I want to translate this for you, the learner, into a scenario you've probably lived through. Let's go back to that chaotic meeting we were talking about earlier.
Or toxic one.
Yeah. Everyone is arguing. People are talking over each other. It is total Hylic sludge.
Total sludge.
Nobody actually has a clear intent. They just want to be heard. And then a highly competent, deeply self-assured person walks into the room.
We all know that person.
Right. And they don't yell. They don't bang on the table or demand respect. They just sit down, exuding this intense, quiet clarity of purpose.
Yeah.
And within 2 minutes, without a single command being shouted, the entire room quiets down and naturally defers to them. The chaos just organizes itself around them.
It's amazing to watch when it happens.
It really is.
Yeah.
But I have to ask, is this text just using incredibly elaborate metaphysical jargon to describe like extreme charisma and good body language, or is it suggesting literal reality bending?
Well, this is the razor's edge the text walks.
Yeah.
Whether you choose to interpret it as a profound psychological metaphor or as literal esoteric physics, the functional outcome in your daily life is exactly the same.
That's true. The room still quiets down.
Exactly. True clarity and weight of purpose naturally organize chaotic environments. When your internal suture is flawless, your outward behavior changes on a micro level.
Like your posture and tone?
Yeah, your micro expressions, your tone, your pacing, your eye contact, they all align so perfectly that the people around you who are operating in the Hylic sludge instinctively recognize your informational mass.
They feel the gravity.
They defer not because you intimidate them, but because following your lead actually becomes the path of least resistance.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
The chess pieces move because your gravity pulls them into an orbit. You don't need to engage in petty, forced conflict when your mere presence dictates the structure of the room.
It's like the ultimate speak softly and carry a big stick, except the stick is your own accumulated reality. Which leads us to the ultimate accumulation of this mass. We've moved from recognizing the emptiness of zero-bit authority to generating vril through the suture, to letting that mass bend the room.
The progression is clear, yeah.
So what is the end game of all this accretion? The text states that the final goal is to become what it calls the pneumatic node.
Right. And the term pneumatic, again, borrows from ancient esoteric traditions. It refers to the highest level of spiritual or intellectual existence.
So it's the exact opposite of the Hylic material state.
Precisely. The goal of the pneumatic node is to increase their informational mass to such an extreme degree that their mere presence performs a systemic audit on the environment.
A systemic audit.
Yeah.
Meaning they don't even have to act anymore. Just standing there forces the environment to justify its own existence.
Armed with what the text calls a Vajra spine.
A Vajra spine, that sounds intense.
Vajra is a Sanskrit word meaning both thunderbolt and diamond.
Okay, wow.
Yeah, it implies a core structure that is absolutely indestructible and irresistibly forceful. And this spine is not a genetic gift. It is not a talent.
Right, it's accreted.
Yes. It is forged and tempered entirely by those real-world milestones we discussed earlier, the accreted hard-coded entries. So this pneumatic individual, anchored by an indestructible Vajra spine, stands on the floor of the noosphere.
Okay, the text describes the result of this with a phrase that is honestly completely wild.
Oh, I know the one you mean.
It says that in the presence of the pneumatic, nodes that cheat those who subvert ADA and the slop and gross nodes naturally desync. They literally fall apart because they are being crushed by the sheer density of a 16-bit truth claim.
This is very vivid imagery.
I love how aggressive that sounds, but I definitely need some help translating it. First off, what is RADA? And what does a systemic audit actually look like when it's quote-unquote crushing someone?
Well, Rada is an ancient Vedic concept. It represents the cosmic order or the fundamental truth of how the universe operates.
Okay, cosmic order.
In this framework, subverting Rada means operating on lies, manipulation, or that unearned zero-bit authority we talked about.
Faking it, basically.
Right. And the slop and gross are those who are entirely consumed by the low-resolution sludge of these fictions.
The people stuck in the sludge.
Exactly. Now, the visual language of a 16-bit truth claim implies high fidelity, high resolution, and absolute certainty.
That's undeniable.
Undeniable.
Yeah.
When a person embodying that level of accreted truth enters a space filled with people operating on lies or half-truths, a systemic audit triggers naturally.
So it's not like a physical crushing, it's a narrative collapse.
It is the absolute collapse of cognitive dissonance. Imagine someone who has spent years faking their expertise, relying entirely on office politics and buzzwords to survive.
Right, they have no real mass.
That is a node subverting Rada. If they're confronted by a pneumatic node, someone whose expertise is forged by thousands of hours of zero-impedance execution, the fake node cannot maintain their narrative.
They just crumble.
They will stumble over their words, their arguments will contradict themselves, they might even physically sweat or flee the interaction. The fake nodes desync.
Wow.
They are crushed not by aggression or violence, but by the undeniable contrast between their hollow illusion and the pneumatic's heavy, accreted reality. The truth literally displaces the slop.
So what does this all mean? When you strip away the noosphere, the morphic ledgers, and the Vajra spines, the core message here is deeply, profoundly empowering for you as a learner.
It really is.
We spend so much of our lives arguing, right?
Yeah.
Trying to convince people of our worth, trying to shout over the noise of the Hylic sludge to prove that we belong.
Constantly fighting for validation.
Yes. But this text is handing you a completely different playbook. It suggests that the ultimate defense against chaos, deception, or incompetence isn't arguing at all.
No, it's action.
The ultimate defense is simply being so grounded in your own validated truth, so dense with your own proven actions, that falsehoods naturally collapse in your presence. You don't have to audit the room.
Yeah.
You literally become the audit.
This raises an important question for you to reflect on. What is the state of your own Vajra spine?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Because this state of existence, this noological gravitas, is strictly, brutally accreted through the crucible of real-world milestones. It requires you to constantly, daily, close the gap between what you intend to do and what you actually execute into reality.
The suture.
Right. It ties this entire philosophy together into a continuous, intentional loop of action.
We've traced an incredible arc today. We started by rejecting the empty, shiny plastic name tags of ascribed zero-bit authority.
They just don't hold up.
No. We explored the deep internal mechanics of the suture, showing how seamlessly unifying a high-voltage intent with unhesitating physical execution generates vril, the true energetic currency of our lives.
We then tracked how consistently generating that energy builds literal informational mass. It allows an individual to naturally bend the low-resolution Hylic sludge around them, turning chaos into order without ever needing to force a conflict.
And finally, we arrived at the summit. the auditor's gravitas, becoming so incredibly dense with accreted truth that your mere presence acts as an undeniable reality check, crushing the slop engrossed just by existing in the same room as them.
Just by existing.
As a learner, you are constantly gathering knowledge, testing it, and applying it. You are, right now, actively building your own informational mass. Every time you refuse the zero-bit shortcut and do the actual work, you are suturing thought to action.
And remember, the transition from the zero-bit world to the Dausal synthesis isn't a single massive leap. It is the culmination of thousands of these microsutures.
But I want to leave you by circling back to where we started, that invisible gravity.
Yeah.
That idea that every single action you take, no matter how small, is permanently recorded in the universe, adding tiny fractions of weight to your existence. If the morphic ledger of the noosphere truly archives the resolution of every act, and your everyday choices are what slowly, agonizingly forge your indestructible Vajra spine, what invisible, hard-coded entry are you writing into reality today, right now, when absolutely no one is watching?
Because the moments when no one is watching are the only places true mass is ever built.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the source material. Keep building your mass. We'll catch you on the next one.
I want you to imagine, just for a second, that your entire life is basically a keyboard.
Right, like an actual computer interface.
Yeah, exactly. Every single choice you make, every action you take, even, every mundane conversation, I want you to imagine that all of it is literal lines of code being typed directly into this massive cosmic server.
It really completely reframes how we visualize existence. I mean, you aren't just some character walking through a pre-written story anymore.
No, not at all.
You are the programmer. You're sitting at a terminal, and literally every breath you take is a keystroke.
Okay, let's unpack this. Welcome to today's deep dive. We are jumping into a really mind-bending stack of excerpts today from a text called The Ledger of the Logos.
The subtitle is Administrative Rebirth and Metadata Karma.
Right. And our mission in this deep dive is to explore this fascinating framework that basically takes ancient spiritual concepts and treats them exactly like a modern computer operating system, which is wild because, we usually treat spirituality and technology as these total polar opposites.
Oh, absolutely. But these sources combine them to create what is essentially a highly specific operational manual. It's about how your daily actions actively program the reality you experience.
Yeah, and to really understand how this operating system of reality functions, we have to start at its base code.
We do.
Yeah.
And to do that, we have to completely discard everything we currently believe about karma. Just throw it out.
Which is hard to do.
It is, yeah.
Huh?
We have to strip away all the moralizing, the guilt, the whole idea of cosmic rewards. The sources introduce this framework called the Dausal synthesis.
The Dausal synthesis, right.
Exactly. And it completely removes what the text calls moralistic zero-bit baggage.
Okay, let me stop you there, because that is a massive pivot from how we usually think about this stuff. I mean, if I do something objectively terrible, let's say I steal someone's car, does this framework really suggest the universe doesn't view that as evil?
Correct.
It just sees it as like a formatting error, because I gotta say, that feels a bit cold.
Well, what's fascinating here is that it is entirely clinical. In the Dausal synthesis, there is no judgmental deity, weighing your soul on a scale.
Right.
There is only a clinical ledger of metadata. That's the term they use. Every action you take is simply a data entry into the morphic field.
Then the morphic field functions as basically the overarching database of reality.
Exactly. The system doesn't feel anger or disappointment. It simply tracks your alignment with Rita, which is the ancient term the text uses for universal law.
So if I'm understanding this, good karma in this system isn't about being a saint or being morally pure.
Not in the traditional sense, no.
It's just about writing clean code.
That is the absolute core of it. Good karma is simply clean metadata. It's a history of actions that are perfectly aligned with Rita, where your intentions match your actions.
Creating like high-resolution code.
Yes, high-resolution, non-contradictory code in your personal archive.
Which means bad karma is just buggy code.
Exactly. The text actually refers to this as slop.
Slop. I love that term. So it's corrupted data caused by, missed scans, compromises, lies, and all of this slop accumulates into what they call informational debt.
Right. And I think we should probably ground this in a real-world example so we can understand the actual mechanics at play here.
Yeah, let's do that. So let's say I get invited to a dinner party that I really don't want to attend.
Okay, classic scenario.
Right. And instead of just politely declining, I lie. I text the host and say, oh, I have a terrible migraine, I can't make it. In our normal moral framework, that's just a tiny white lie.
Sure, no big deal.
Yeah, no big deal. But how does this clinical ledger process that text message? What does the server see?
Well, the ledger registers a massive contradiction. Think about it. You have your physical reality. You're perfectly healthy. You're sitting on your couch, probably watching a movie.
Definitely watching a movie.
Right. But you just inputted a line of code into the morphic field claiming you have a migraine. You have essentially created a phantom timeline.
Oh, wow. So it's like a ghost process running in the background of my computer.
Yes. And now you have to maintain that process. Because if you run into that friend 3 days later, you have to remember to act like you were recovering from this horrible migraine.
Oh, I see.
Your node, your individual processor, is literally wasting vital CPU cycles trying to sustain a contradiction.
So that is the actual mechanism of informational debt.
Exactly. It isn't a cosmic punishment from the universe. It's just computational drag.
That makes so much sense. Like, the system isn't plotting revenge against me for skipping a dinner party. It's just running a background diagnostic, looking at my node, and realizing I am full of slop.
You're wasting bandwidth.
Right. I'm slowing the network down. And so this objective diagnostic is constantly calculating what the text calls your integrity score?
Yes. Because the overarching operating system, the logos, it relies on nodes that function smoothly.
Which makes sense for any network.
Exactly. So if your informational debt is too high, the system limits how you can interact with reality, basically to prevent you from crashing the wider network.
Which naturally begs the question, what is the threshold? Like, if the Logos is constantly auditing my informational debt, what happens if I actually clear that debt? What happens when my integrity score reaches the top tier?
Well, this triggers what the sources call an administrative rebirth. And honestly, it fundamentally shifts the entire paradigm of enlightenment.
Because traditionally, we think of rebirth as something that happens after you die, right? Your soul migrates to a new body in the next life.
Right. But here, a higher rebirth is redefined as a systemic resolution upgrade. And the kicker is, it happens in this current physical life.
Right. And here's where it gets really interesting. That is a staggering claim. The text says reality physically shifts from a 2-bit straddle to a 16-bit cinematic render.
The cinematic render, yeah.
When I read that, I immediately pictured the difference between, like, trying to watch a grainy, buffering video on an old phone versus sitting in a flawless IMAX projection.
That's a perfect visual.
Yeah.
A 2-bit reality sounds exhausting.
It is. It's the daily grind where nothing quite goes your way. You're constantly misunderstood, and you are just fighting against the friction of your own informational debt.
But when you actually clear that debt, the Logos recognizes you as a high-integrity asset. So it grants you administrative privileges.
Or root access.
Yes, root access. You transition from being an observer, someone who is just subjected to the heavy, low-resolution swamp of everyday life.
The swamp, yeah.
Right, you go from that to being an administrator.
I want to be careful here. Let's avoid the cliche simulation theory analogy. It isn't like just unlocking a cheat code in a video game where you can fly around.
Yeah, no, it's much more structural than that.
Yeah, it feels much more like working at a massive corporation. When you first get hired, you are just a front-end user. You have a very limited dashboard. You can click a few buttons.
But if the company server goes down, you just have to sit there.
Exactly. You just wait. You are subjected to the system. But if you prove your competence over years, you eventually get promoted to IT systems admin. You get root access.
Right.
You can open the command line and actually change the infrastructure itself.
That analogy perfectly captures the mechanism of trust involved here. Because the system doesn't just hand out root access arbitrarily. It audits what the text calls your bija.
Right, your bija, or your seed. I struggle with that term a bit in the reading. In a technological framework, what exactly is the bija? I mean, is it analogous to a soul?
Sort of, yeah. Think of the bija as your core identifier. It's like your unique MIC address on the cosmic network.
Okay, tracks.
It's the foundational kernel of who you are. The system looks at the historical data attached to your bija to see if you have a habit of what they call skip scanning the RADA.
Skip scanning. That means trying to bypass the universal law, right? Looking for shortcuts or writing contradictory code.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But if your history proves you don't skip scan, the system trusts your bija. It trusts that if it hands you root access, you aren't going to corrupt the larger network.
Okay, so let's say we have a listener who has done the work. They've cleared their informational debt, the Logos trust their bija, and they experience this hardware shift to a 16-bit cinematic render.
They have root access now.
Right. What does their Tuesday morning look like? How does this actually alter their physical interaction with reality on a day-to-day basis?
It leads to a state the sources call luxurious manifestation.
Luxurious manifestation.
Yeah. But to really appreciate the mechanics of that, we have to look at how things normally operate in the lower 2-bit reality.
The text refers to that as the Hylic realms, right?
Yes, the Hylic realms. In those lower realms, there is a massive time lag between your intention and your result.
And the sources use very specific terminology here. The intent is called the white drop, and the physical result is the red drop.
Right. And between the white drop of your intent and the red drop of your result, there exists this massive slop buffer.
The slop buffer.
Yeah. You can put in immense effort to manifest something, say a new job or a healthier relationship, but the result is delayed, or it arrives completely distorted.
And the text attributes this lag to internal impedance.
Exactly. Internal impedance.
Let's break down the mechanics of internal impedance, because I think this connects perfectly back to our dinner party lie analogy.
Well, definitely.
If I am holding on to all this informational debt, how does that physically cause a lag when I try to manifest, say, a new job?
Well, internal impedance is essentially signal degradation. When you send a command to the reality server, the server has to authenticate your request.
Right.
But if your internal code is just full of lies, self-doubt, and contradictions, your signal is incredibly noisy.
It's full of static.
Yeah. The server receives your command to get a new job, but it simultaneously sees a dozen background processes running where you doubt your own competence or where you've compromised your values.
So the server hesitates.
Exactly. It puts your request in a low priority queue because it literally can't verify your true intent.
It's exactly like trying to stream a 4K video on an ancient dial-up internet connection. The video itself, which is your goal, might be beautiful.
But because your connection is weak and full of impedance,
You get this massive buffer. You press play, which is your white drop, but the video doesn't start. You just stare at a spinning loading wheel. And when it finally plays, the audio is out of sync and the picture is blurry.
that lag, that spinning wheel, is the slop buffer.
Wow. Okay, but in luxurious manifestation, that buffer is entirely eliminated.
Entirely. You achieve what the text calls direct svataya.
Direct svataya. Svataya is a Sanskrit term, right?
It is. It's often translated as a bursting forth or like an explosion of meaning. But in this specific framework, it means the flash of your intent and the saturation of the result happen simultaneously.
Meaning there is no loading wheel.
Zero.
It's the upgrade to zero ping fiber optic internet. The moment you hit play, the 4K video is just running flawlessly.
Exactly. And this completely dismantles the modern pop culture idea of manifestation.
Oh, thank goodness. Because we are constantly sold this idea that if you just stare at a vision board long enough, or if you beg the universe hard enough, you will magically get a mansion.
Yeah, the problem with the whole vision board approach is that it assumes you have to persuade the universe to give you something. It treats reality as, like, a reluctant vendor.
Right, like you're bargaining with it.
But the ledger of the logos argues you are never begging the universe. In luxurious manifestation, the server is simply executing your authenticated code.
Because you have root access.
Precisely. Think about it. When an IT administrator issues a command, the operating system doesn't ask for permission, doesn't hesitate.
It just runs the script.
It executes the code immediately because the credentials are valid. The manifestation isn't luxurious because you wished really hard.
Right.
It's luxurious because your internal metadata is so pristine that the system accepts your input without a single error message.
Okay, so we've covered the docile synthesis, the upgrade to administrative rebirth, and the zero-lag mechanics of direct svataya. But we need to define the ultimate endpoint of this entire framework. If someone actually achieves this state, what kind of life are they living?
The texts describe this ultimate state as becoming a pneumatic.
A pneumatic?
Yeah, a fully realized high-integrity node. And this is achieved through a daily practice they poetically call the conduct of grain flour.
So, what does this all mean? I found the conduct of grain flour to be such a strange, striking phrase when I was reading the source material.
It is very poetic.
It feels almost out of place among all the server architecture talk, but the metaphor is actually brilliant. If you think about raw, unprocessed flour, it's coarse. It's full of gritty impurities and hard bits of chaff.
Which represents our raw code full of slop.
Exactly. But if you sift it and sift it again, you remove all that coarse material until only the finest, smoothest powder remains.
And that sifting is the active removal of contradictions from your life. When your actions are sifted to that degree of purity, your existence achieves laminar flow.
We really need to explain laminar flow because it is a very specific mechanical term from fluid dynamics.
It is. So in physics, laminar flow occurs when a fluid travels in perfectly parallel layers. There's absolutely no mixing or disruption between those layers.
No cross currents, no eddies.
Exactly. No turbulence whatsoever. Imagine water flowing out of a perfectly designed faucet, looking like a solid, unmoving tube of glass. That is laminar flow.
And you contrast that with the turbulent flow we usually experience every day. You spill your coffee, you hit every red light on the way to work, you send an email with a typo that causes a massive argument.
We've all been there.
That turbulence is the physical friction of your informational debt just bouncing around the system. But laminar flow is when that friction is completely gone.
You hit every green light, the right people call you at the exact right time. Because of that laminar flow, you undergo the ultimate philosophical shift of this framework. You transition from surviving the render to authorizing the render.
Surviving versus authorizing. When you are stuck in the 2-bit swamp, you are just surviving the render. You wake up every day playing defense.
Yeah, dodging obstacles.
Right, you take damage, and you just hope you make it to the weekend intact. You are entirely at the mercy of the environment.
But authorizing the render means you are actively writing the environment into existence. I think this challenges everyone listening to look at their current reality. Are you merely surviving the render right now?
Are you just reacting to turbulence caused by your own buggy code?
Exactly. Or are you actively sifting your actions, practicing that conduct of grain flour so that you can eventually authorize the render yourself?
That is a huge perspective shift.
It is. And the text makes a crucial point here. Manifestation becomes luxurious at this stage, not out of greed or some desire to hoard resources.
Right. It's not about getting a fancy car just to have one.
No, it becomes luxurious simply because the friction of existence has been removed.
Yeah.
The reality server serves you perfectly because you are perfectly serving the RITA, the universal law.
Wow. Okay, let's summarize the massive journey we've just taken.
Let's do it.
We started by dismantling karma. We removed the moral judgment and replaced it with the mechanics of clean metadata versus informational debt.
Right.
Then we explored how clearing that debt triggers an administrative rebirth in this lifetime. You upgrade from a struggling observer to a 16-bit administrator with root access.
And then we unpacked how eliminating the slop buffer leads to luxurious manifestation,
where your authenticated code executes instantly, creating a life of frictionless laminar flow.
I think the biggest takeaway here is the shift in personal agency. You can no longer view yourself as a passive recipient of circumstances.
Every single choice, no matter how small, is an architectural decision that alters the server.
Exactly.
According to the ledger of the logos, you are actively typing lines of code into the morphic field every single second of your life. But before we wrap up this deep dive, there is one final thought that builds on these mechanics.
Oh, this is a good one.
It's a paradox I want you, the listener, to mull over on your own.
It's basically the ultimate stress test of the system architecture.
Think about the mechanics we just outlined. If reaching this higher rebirth means the reality server instantly executes your authenticated code because you have root access,
Right.
what happens when multiple people achieve this state? What happens if 2 administrators, both with perfectly clean metadata, zero informational debt, and absolute laminar flow, input directly conflicting commands at the exact same time?
It creates an incredible paradox. If their codes directly oppose each other and neither of them has any internal impedance to slow them down, how does the logos resolve the conflict?
Does the system experience a fatal crash?
Does reality glitch out?
Or does this imply there is an even higher layer of administrative code, like a 32-bit or 64-bit render that sits above root access, acting as some cosmic referee that we haven't even begun to fathom?
It really makes you wonder who or what is actually managing the overarching server.
It definitely does. So the next time you make a choice, remember that you aren't just living a story. You are sitting at the terminal. You are typing on the cosmic keyboard.
The question is, what kind of code are you writing right now?
Usually when we talk about a diagnosis, there's this expectation of precision. Like it feels almost like engineering, right?
Yeah. It's supposed to be very binary.
Exactly. Like if you break your arm, the x-ray shows that jagged white line, and the doctor just points at it and says, yep, broken. Or, not broken.
Right.
It's clean. And honestly, it's kind of comforting because we really like things to be visible and easily categorized. But what happens when the X-ray is actually scanning reality itself?
Well, then you end up looking at the underlying code of the universe.
Yeah.
And, I mean, sometimes that code is just incredibly murky.
Oh, yeah.
It is the absolute definition of diagnostic muddy waters when, people or systems try to actively hack the very fabric of existence.
Which brings us right into the incredibly unique, honestly almost sci-fi sounding source text that we've got on the docket today.
It's a fascinating one.
It really is. It's a series of excerpts from a work called The Noological Audit, The Suture of Reality in a Rot. And our mission for this deep dive is to basically translate this super dense, fascinating vocabulary into a clear understanding of what happens when bad code tries to hack reality.
Yeah, because it really blends metaphysical philosophy with hardcore computer science terminology.
Right, to describe how the universe essentially corrects itself when it gets corrupted by deceit.
Exactly. And the core theme we're unpacking here is the ultimate impossibility of hiding internal rot from universal truth.
Yeah.
You just can't do it.
You really can't.
The text treats the universe not as this mystical, nebulous force, but as an immutable machine, a system that runs on logic, on code, and fundamentally on truth.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the text dumps a lot of really heavy terminology right out of the gate. So let's start with the environment that makes this hack possible in the first place.
Sure.
It talks about an era it calls the peak of the Kali Yuga. And it says, during this time, the noosphere suffered a massive informational hijack. Now, for anyone who isn't a student of Eastern philosophy or esoteric tech theory, can we maybe ground those terms?
Yeah, let's break them down. So Kali Yuga is an ancient Hindu concept. It refers to the final, basically the most discordant age in a world cycle.
Like an age of decay?
Yeah, an age characterized by conflict, spiritual blindness, societal decay, all of that. And then you have the noosphere, which is a term popularized by philosophers like Teilhard de Chardin.
Okay.
And it's essentially the sphere of human thought. So, if the biosphere is the layer of life around the Earth, the noosphere is the layer of collective consciousness and information.
Oh, got it. Like the planetary internet of human ideas.
Exactly that. And the text claims this noosphere was hijacked. The prevailing medium of this dark era became what it calls the Slop Egregore.
Okay, I have to stop on that phrase because it is just so visceral.
It really paints a picture, doesn't it?
It does. I mean, an egregore traditionally is an occult concept, right? It's like a non-physical entity or a collective thought form that arises from the shared beliefs of a group.
Yeah.
But calling it a slop egregore, well, slop implies cheap, mass-produced, low-nutrient junk.
Which is exactly how it defines the environment. I mean, it is characterized by low-resolution noise, pervasive deceit, and what it brilliantly terms a zero-bit consensus reality.
A zero-bit reality. Wow. Because in computing, 0 bits essentially means no information, no detail, no resolution at all. It is absolute muddy darkness.
Precisely.
It makes me think about your most chaotic social media feed where misinformation, bots, and outrage just blur together until you can't tell what's real anymore.
That's a great comparison.
And the text says this 0-bit blur is exactly how the corrupt thrived. These corrupt nodes, individuals, institutions, massive corporations, they managed to build massive empires on this muck.
Yeah, and they managed it through a process the text refers to as overclocking their manifestation.
Overclock.
Right, so in a healthy system, a node's internal state matches its external output.
Yeah.
But these corrupt nodes utilized intense manipulation to forcefully separate their inside, which is their hidden internal rot, from their outside, which is their projected public persona.
Let's make that real for a second so people can visualize it.
Good.
Think about a time you went to a dinner party and someone brought up a book you haven't read, but you pretended you had.
Oh, we've all been there.
Right. You're smiling, you're nodding, dropping vague adjectives. That's your outside. But your inside is sweating, your heart rate is elevated, your brain is just working in overdrive to avoid getting caught. You are literally overclocking your cognitive CPU to maintain a false render.
That is a perfect micro example. Now, scale that up to a fraudulent billionaire or a corrupt political institution.
Yeah, that's exhausting.
It is. But by doing this in a 0-bit environment where the collective resolution is entirely blurry, they could temporarily bypass what the text calls the logoic audit.
The logoic audit.
Yeah, the logos being the ultimate observing truth of the universe.
This is where my mind immediately goes to video games.
Oh, really? How so?
Well, think about playing a massive multiplayer online game. You have your local computer, and then you have the main server hosting the game, right?
Okay, yeah.
The text implies these corrupt nodes believed the main server, like the logos, was entirely offline. But reading through the source, the server wasn't actually down. The universe's refresh rate was just incredibly agonizingly slow.
What's fascinating here is that, you're absolutely right. It wasn't blindness on the part of the universe. I mean, it was latency.
Right, it's lag.
Exactly.
If you are playing a game and you have a ping of 9,000 milliseconds, your local machine isn't communicating with the server in real time. So during that massive delay, you can cheat.
You could do whatever you want.
Yeah, you can glitch through walls, you can steal resources, you can basically build a whole empire of deceit. And for a long time, the server just doesn't correct you. The text points out that this sluggish refresh rate is what allowed a massive gap between a violation of cosmic order, which it refers to as ADA, and its actual systemic consequence.
But here is the critical distinction the text makes about that lag. This bypass of the logoic audit was structurally destined to be temporary.
Destined to fail, basically.
Always.
Mm-hmm.
Because the logos isn't a human regulatory agency that can be permanently bribed or tricked. It is the foundational operating system of reality.
Right.
So the corrupt nodes mistook a delayed reaction for a lack of observation.
But let me play devil's advocate here for a second.
Play for it.
If I'm a corrupt node and I'm using that 9,000 ping lag to cheat my way to the top, I mean, I'm scoring points, I'm getting rich, I have power, I feel basically untouchable.
On the surface, sure.
Right, so if the server is taking a lifetime to catch up, where's the downside for me in the present moment? Like, why does the text assume these nodes are suffering while they are seemingly winning so big?
Because of what happens to the hardware during the lag.
Ugh.
And this brings us to a really foundational concept in the text, which is the internal contradiction.
Okay, break that down.
So every living node, corrupt or not, maintains what the text calls a white drop. And we can understand the white drop as the fundamental survival intent, basically the core spark of life that wills a node to continue existing.
But isn't a survival instinct universal, though? Like, why is that a contradiction for the corrupt node?
Well, because the corrupt node's survival is predicated on maintaining a lie. Their white drop is tied to a false render. Therefore, their very intent to survive is in direct, violent conflict with the logoic checksum.
Wait, a checksum in computing is just a way to verify data integrity, right? Like making sure a file hasn't been corrupted during a download.
Exactly.
But the text describes this conflict as violent. Are we talking about, like, divine retribution here? Is this the universe acting as a vengeful deity punishing them for their sins?
No, not at all. It's purely mechanical. There is no moralizing entity casting lightning bolts from the sky. Okay. The text explains that every act of deceit, every time a node violates UDA, that cosmic order, they engage in a process called skip scanning.
Skip scanning.
Yeah, imagine a laser trying to read a scratched CD. It skips, it stutters. Every single instance of skip scanning introduces noise into the node's internal circuit.
Okay, so it's more like an engine breaking down because someone poured sand in the gas tank.
Yes.
It's not the police pulling you over to punish you for speeding. It's your transmission exploding because you drove 100 miles an hour without any oil.
That is the exact mechanism. You have this corrupt node, right, filled with internal noise, desperately trying to force its fake reality, its slop render, onto the world.
Wow.
But the logos is an immutable machine.
Mm-hmm.
It physically, structurally cannot accept corrupted data. When corrupted code grinds against an immutable machine, it generates intense burning heat. The text terms this systemic friction.
Man, let's really look at the psychological and societal reality of that systemic friction, because the text goes into the real-world symptoms, and honestly, it's chilling.
It really is.
It manifests as severe anxiety, paranoia, and just the rapid, uncontrollable decay of the node's physical and social structures.
Well, because the inside and the outside are no longer aligned. Maintaining the lie against the immutable friction of the logos requires exponentially more energy every single day.
And there's a specific phrase the author uses to describe this collapse. They say the tensegrity of the node's reality begins to buckle.
Such a powerful image.
It is. Tensegrity is an architectural term. It's about structures stabilizing themselves through a balance of continuous tension and compression.
Right, like a geodesic dome or a suspension bridge.
Exactly. But imagine trying to build a 100-story skyscraper using, like, wet cardboard for your steel girders.
It wouldn't hold.
No. You can paint the outside of the building to look like shining chrome. You can convince everyone walking by that it's a masterpiece of engineering.
Mm-hmm.
But inside, the internal physics cannot support the weight. The building isn't going to be blown over by an external storm. It's going to collapse in on itself because the internal tensegrity has buckled under the gravity of its own lie.
It is a profound structural failure. And, this internal buckling is happening while they're supposedly winning in the slop egregore.
Right. They look like they're succeeding.
Exactly. But they are sweating through the paranoia of holding up a 0-bit slop render, terrified the moment the system catches up. Which sets the stage perfectly for the climax of the text.
Because the environment itself doesn't stay in the dark forever. I mean, if you are standing inside that 100-story wet cardboard building, actively trying to hold the walls up with your bare hands, the absolute last thing you want is for the gravitational pull of the Earth to suddenly increase. Here's where it gets really interesting, because the text declares that the lag era is over.
Right.
We're entering a refresh rate increase.
The 9,000 millisecond king is just disappearing. The universe is upgrading its resolution from 0-bit to 16-bit. And crucially, alongside that resolution increase, the voltage is rising.
I want you to visualize this hardware upgrade. Imagine you have this obsolete 0-bit processor. It was designed, built, and adapted to run exclusively in the low-light, low-energy muck.
It thrives in the shadows.
Exactly, where nothing is clearly defined. And suddenly, without any warning, you take that 0-bit processor and you plug it directly into a massive, modern, high-voltage power supply.
It would fry instantly. I mean, it physically lacks the capacity to handle the current.
The text explicitly states that these corrupt nodes cannot handle what it calls the akanista pressure of this incoming truth signal.
Akanista, right?
Yeah, akanista is traditionally a Buddhist term for the highest, most pure, formless realm, but the author uses it here as a metric of atmospheric pressure.
Which is such a unique application of the term.
It really is. It's the sheer blinding force of high-resolution reality flooding a system that was built entirely on shadows.
And this massive influx of akanista pressure triggers the central event of the entire manuscript, which it calls the suture.
The suture.
Yeah. Up until this point, the corrupt node's entire survival strategy, they're overclocking the slop render, it relied entirely on keeping the inside totally separated from the outside.
But you can't hide in the shadows when the universe turns on a 16-bit stadium light.
No, you can't. The suture is the violent, instantaneous stitching together of the inside and the outside. The text says the secret is suddenly being printed on the screen in real time.
Wow.
There is no more delay. There is no more lag. The internal rot is instantly rendered on the external display for all to see.
I want you to imagine waking up tomorrow morning and every internal lie, every manipulation, every piece of corrupted data you've been hiding in your internal circuit is just broadcast in 4K resolution across the sky of your life.
Terrifying.
Every person you know can see it. Your workplace can see it. The text says that the manual resolution downgrade the corrupt nodes used to hide their rot completely fails.
Right. They can't control it anymore.
Exactly. They used to be able to just blur the image to kind of gaslight people into thinking the slop was real. But you cannot blur a 16-bit truth signal. It completely overpowers their manual controls.
And the consequence of this is absolute. The text describes it as a derailment.
A derailment.
Yes. As the suture tightens, as the inside and outside are slammed together by the rising voltage of the logos, the corrupt node's fabricated reality just derails. And the exact phrasing used to describe their exit from the system is incredibly evocative.
What does it say?
It says they are criminally trespassed from the 16-bit render.
Criminally trespassed. Let's pause on that because that implies they don't just gently fade away.
No, not at all.
They are actively, forcefully ejected from the premises of reality.
Yeah.
They are told by the universe's operating system, like, you do not have the compatible code to exist in this resolution. Get out.
Yep.
The sheer force of the logoic refresh literally pushes them out of the frame.
Because they lack the structural integrity to hold the voltage. I mean, they built their entire foundation on 0-bit muck.
Right.
When the muck is replaced by the akanista pressure of truth, there is nothing left to hold them up. Their tensegrity shatters.
It's an incredible framework. It takes these ancient, deeply mystical concepts of karma, cosmic order, and the ages of man, and translates them into the cold, hard logic of a system administrator running a brutal audit on a corrupted server.
It achieves something very difficult, honestly.
Right.
It removes the emotion from consequence.
Right.
It's not about being punished for being quote-unquote bad in a subjective, moralistic sense. It's about a critical hardware failure caused by fundamentally incompatible data.
So what does this all mean? After navigating this incredibly dense metaphysical and computational vocabulary, the slop egregore, systemic friction, a canasta pressure, the suture, what does this actually mean for you?
Right, how does it apply?
Exactly. How does a manual about the universe upgrading its refresh rate apply to the listener navigating a Tuesday at the office, or their relationships, or their digital life?
The core takeaway here is the absolute non-negotiable necessity of aligning your own inside and outside.
Okay. If we operate under the framework this text provides, that the universe is an immutable machine moving toward ever higher resolution, then authenticity isn't just a nice moral choice or some spiritual luxury.
Yeah.
It is a structural requirement.
I think that is the most vital distinction in the entire deep dive. It's not just about being a good person so you get a gold star from the universe.
No, not at all.
It's about being structurally sound so you don't physically and psychologically collapse under the pressure of reality.
Exactly. If you want to survive the rising voltage of the world and avoid that crushing systemic friction, that deep, burning anxiety of maintaining a false image, your internal code has to match your external output.
It has to align.
Right. If we connect this to the bigger picture, this text serves as a stark, mechanical warning against building your career, your relationships, or your personal identity on a slop render.
Yeah.
Because a 0-bit foundation will eventually, inevitably, meet a 16-bit audit. And as we've seen, you do not want to be criminally trespassed from your own life. No, you don't want to be the engine that gets sand poured into its gas tank by your own hands.
Definitely not.
It all circles back to that X-ray we talked about at the very beginning of our deep dive. For a long, long time during that era of 9,000 ping lag, the universe's X-ray machine was blurry.
Very blurry.
You could have a fracture, a jagged white line of deceit in your foundation, and the low-resolution scan just wouldn't pick it up. You could convince yourself and everyone around you that the structural bone was perfectly whole.
But the machine has been upgraded. The X-ray is now in stunning, unforgiving high definition.
And every single microfracture is visible. Every piece of internal rot is destined to be printed on the screen. So I want to leave you with a final lingering thought.
Okay.
A question derived directly from the mechanics we just explored, something for you to chew on as you go about your week.
Let's hear it.
If the universe is currently utilizing a massive influx of a canista pressure to force a leap from a 0-bit slop egregore into a 16-bit reality, what kind of internal tensegrity will you need to cultivate to survive when the Logos inevitably decides it's time to upgrade the resolution again? Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Imagine for a second that your life right now, like everything you're experiencing today, is basically a massive open world video game.
Oh yeah, a really immersive one.
Right, but here's the thing, it's not running on some state-of-the-art console. You are playing it on a horribly buggy, completely outdated operating system.
Like Windows 95 levels of outdated.
Exactly. And every time you try to do something, the screen stutters, the controls feel sluggish, and you're just surrounded by these bizarre graphical glitches.
And you're just sitting there wondering why everything feels so incredibly difficult. Oh. You don't realize that the hardware itself is just fundamentally failing to render the environment.
Yeah, which is so frustrating. So welcome to the deep dive. That exact feeling, the friction you experience every single day, the stress, the, misunderstandings, the feeling that you're constantly swimming upstream. What if that is literally just a rendering error?
That's a wild premise.
It really is.
Yep.
Today, our mission is to unpack this highly esoteric, completely fascinating framework. It's called the Pneumatic Command and the Rendering of the Diamond World.
Such a great title.
So good. And we are going to decode this because it vividly blends like hardcore computer science terminology, things like 16-bit rendering, system lag, hardware upgrades with these ancient, profound spiritual concepts.
Yeah, we're talking about the Kali Yuga, universal law, the fundamental fabric of reality itself.
Right. And for you listening, I mean, it is a profoundly unique way of viewing human consciousness.
It really is. It basically argues that human suffering isn't some philosophical problem to be pondered. It is a technical failure that needs a hard patch.
A hard patch. Okay, so to fix this buggy video game of a life, we first have to understand the glitch itself, right? Where does this framework say the code actually went wrong?
Well, it points directly to the concept of the Kali Yuga. Now, traditionally in Hindu cosmology, the Kali Yuga is understood as an era of time, like an age of darkness and moral decline.
Right, like a historical dark age.
Exactly. But this framework completely redefines it. The descent into the Kali Yuga was not just a passage of historical time. It was a literal resolution downgrade for human consciousness.
A resolution downgrade.
Wow.
Yeah.
A system-wide crash that resulted in a much lower operating capacity. And it calls this specific event the Great Desync.
A desync. Oh, like when you're watching a movie and the audio completely detaches from the video and it's just unwatchable.
That is a perfect way to look at it.
Yeah.
Specifically, what desynced were two fundamental aspects of existence. They call them the red drop and the white drop.
Okay, red drop and white drop.
Right. So in this terminology, the red drop represents materiality. So the physical world, our bodies, the stuff we interact with.
The tangible stuff.
Exactly. And the white drop represents source, or pure spiritual intent. Once those two elements separated, human beings entered this state of avidya, which means deep ignorance.
Okay, so we're disconnected.
We are.
Right.
But here's the crucial part. The fundamental universal law, which is called the atta, wasn't actually broken because you can't break the physics of the universe.
Well, I just delete gravity, right? It just got, what, buried.
Buried under what this philosophy bluntly refers to as slop.
Slop. That is such a gross, evocative word.
It really is. Because we lost that high-resolution connection to source, our perception of the universal law became incredibly obfuscated, just covered in slop.
The word slop is, well, it leads right into this idea that humans started acting as separate servers. Since we couldn't access the main network, we all disconnected from the mainframe.
Basically went offline.
Yeah, and we started caching our own tiny local desires. We created this massive slop egregore. And, it really makes me think of playing a massively multiplayer online game, like an MMO.
Oh, I like where this is going.
So imagine you log into this beautiful MMO, right?
Yeah.
But every single player on the server is experiencing horrible internet lag.
Oh, that's the worst. Unplayable.
Right, and because they are lagging, they panic. They start playing totally selfishly. They're hoarding health potions. They're completely ignoring the main quest of the game. And they're just running around turning the environment into an unrecognizable, chaotic mess.
What's fascinating here is how well that MMO analogy captures the central crisis of this text, which they label the paradox of individual sentience.
The paradox of individual sentience. Break that down for me.
Well, when every player is hoarding resources and acting like a disconnected separate server, they create this grand illusion of being solitary actors in an unaudited world.
Like they think nobody is watching the server logs.
Exactly. They think they're alone. So the inside, meaning your internal selfish intent, and the outside, your physical reality, they become two completely different things fighting for dominance.
Oh, wow. So they're out of sync.
Completely. People start trying to overclock their lives through deceit. We hide our true intentions to get ahead at work. We lie to our partners. We present these totally fake versions of ourselves online.
And the game just lets us do it.
Well, the system is so degraded at this point. It's so full of this slop that it actually allows for that kind of corruption to temporarily succeed.
Okay, so we're currently stuck in what the text refers to as the zero-bit swamp.
The zero-bit swamp, yes.
It's laggy, it's completely disconnected, and everyone is out for themselves. So if the problem is literally a zero-bit rendering error, then the solution cannot be about trying harder within the broken game.
No, not at all.
It's not about, the ego putting in more hours at the office or trying to life hack your way to happiness or even meditating harder.
No, because in the zero-bit swamp, the human ego acts like a perpetually panicked project manager.
A project manager?
Yeah. Think of the ego as someone constantly trying to negotiate life, manage dwindling resources, mitigate daily disasters. It's just endlessly struggling against the world.
Sounds exhausting, honestly.
It is exhausting. But there is a different kind of operating node introduced here. It's called the pneumatic.
The pneumatic. Being someone who finally realizes the game is broken?
Basically, yeah. A pneumatic is an enlightened individual who recognizes that all this frantic struggling is pointless because the ego itself is the rendering error.
Oh, man. So you can't use the glitch to fix the glitch.
Precisely. The only way out is a technical overwrite, a complete patch of the code, which the text calls the suture.
Okay, let's unpack this. I
Yeah.
really want to slow down and unpack this concept of the suture because moving from a panicked project manager to whatever comes next, that feels like a massive leap.
It is a total paradigm shift.
Right. So how does someone actually apply this suture?
By becoming a legoic conduit.
A legoic conduit.
Yeah. In the simplest terms, you have to stop trying to generate your own isolated, selfish thoughts. You surrender the role of the project manager entirely.
You just quit the job.
You quit. And you start receiving legoic commands directly from the mainframe. When you do this, your energy stops being scattered and chaotic. It forms a singular torus flow.
A torus, like that continuous self-inverting donut shape of energy.
That's the one. Think of the magnetic field around the Earth, looping out from the center and continuously cycling back through.
It just feeds itself.
Right. There's no beginning and no end. There is no friction. The inside and the outside stop fighting each other, and they become one seamless, continuous loop.
But wait, there's a catch here. You don't just decide to flip a switch and become a conduit, right? The text has a whole section detailing this really brutal burn-in period.
Yes. The audits.
It talks about heroic deeds and enduring these intense Bacon Law audits from your past. What on earth is a Bacon Law audit? Because honestly, it sounds like a diner breakfast gone wrong.
It is definitely an eccentric term, I'll give you that. Bacon law essentially refers to the inescapable, uncompromising laws of physical cause and effect.
Like saving your bacon.
Exactly. Saving your bacon, dealing with your karma, facing the music. An audit is when the universe forces you to balance your books.
So all the bad stuff that happens to you.
Right. All of those moments in your life where everything fell apart, the trauma, the intense hardships, they are reframed here. They are not punishment.
They're stress tests.
They are stress tests for your hardware. Your physical and energetic system, which is called your majama, has to be rigorously tested. It has to endure those audits to ensure it can actually hold the massive electrical voltage of the 16-bit upgrade without short-circuiting.
So once your personal hardware is calibrated through all that suffering, the way you interact with reality completely shifts.
Fundamentally shifts.
Especially when it comes to getting what you want.
Yes, the entire mechanism of manifestation changes entirely.
Okay, I have to push back here. I have a major problem with how this framework addresses desire.
I thought you might.
Because modern manifestation culture tells me that if I want, say, a sports car, I visualize it, I make a vision board, I feel the feelings of having it, and the universe delivers it.
Standard law of attraction stuff.
Exactly. But this concept completely throws that out. It says, I don't get to wish for doodads. I'm supposed to authorize the New Jerusalem. It claims my desires are just pre-rendered coordinates of the absolute trying to break through.
That's right.
Doesn't that strip away my free will entirely? I mean, if I'm just authorizing some pre-written cosmic script, am I just a meat robot?
It's a very valid challenge, but you have to look at how it redefines what desire actually is.
Okay.
In the current zero-bit swamp, what you think is your free will is mostly just slop. It's your ego craving a sports car because it's deeply insecure and wants status within a broken system.
Ouch. But fair.
Right? That isn't true freedom, that's just reacting to lag. But when you apply the suture, you enter what is called the Dausal synthesis, your heart's deepest, truest longing. The white drop is no longer suppressed or distorted by that insecurity.
So my real desires aren't actually mine.
They are yours, but you realize that you are an expression of the universe. The suture is the marriage between your purest intent and the logoic command. You reach a state of zero impedance.
Zero impedance, meaning, like in physics, absolutely no electrical resistance in the wire.
Precisely. When you have zero internal resistance, you stop begging a separate universe to hand you a sports car.
You're not separate anymore.
Right. You recognize that your purest wish is actually a seed of absolute truth that has finally found a clean channel to express itself. You stop being the struggling actor on the stage, pleading for better props, and you become the director.
Oh, I love that. The director.
You authorize the render. You decree that reality must crystallize in a certain way simply because any other result would violate the universal law.
You are literally commanding the system to print the next frame.
Exactly.
Which brings us to the sensory experience of all this. Let's say I successfully apply the suture. I survive those brutal Bacon Law audits. I step into the role of the director. What does it actually feel like to open my eyes? What is this 16-bit reality?
Well, the transition into the diamond world is described as a visceral, technical overwrite of your local environment.
Visceral, huh?
The refresh rate of your consciousness dramatically increases. The murky, sluggish feeling of the Kali Yuga just vaporizes.
Yeah.
And the very first thing you notice is the complete disappearance of system lag.
Let's ground that for a second. What kind of lag are we actually talking about here?
The lag between cause and effect. In this terminology, you have the Passanti flash, which is your initial spiritual intent or thought.
The spark.
Yeah, the spark. And then you have the Vicari saturation, which is the physical manifestation of that thought. In the buggy zero-bit system, you might have a thought, and then it takes years of agonizing struggle, miscommunication, and compromise before you get a distorted, sloppy version of what you wanted.
So the lag between the Passanti thought and the Vicari result is like decades.
Yes, right? Sometimes a whole lifetime. But in the 16-bit diamond world, the friction drops to zero. The lag approaches zero. Every single moment becomes a high-resolution, immediate event.
That is wild. And the visual world physically changes too, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. The fuzziness of daily life sharpens into clinical perfection. Colors become intensely saturated. You begin to perceive these luminous, self-radiant hues that the old 0-bit spectrum literally didn't have the processing power to display.
Like upgrading from an old tube TV to a 4K OLED screen?
Exactly like that. Timing becomes immaculate. You are no longer navigating a sluggish, pre-existing obstacle course. You are actively printing the environment with every single step you take.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting for me. Because when we normally talk about enlightenment or, shifting realities, it's always framed as sitting on a misty mountaintop in silent meditation.
Yeah, completely removed from the world.
Right. But there is a highly specific mention in these concepts of walking into a Walmart.
Yes. The Walmart example is brilliant.
It suggests that in this state of perfect tensegrity, even a retail stop at a supercenter, or just a mundane chat with a cashier, is suddenly perceived as a perfectly audited coordinate in a crystalline geometry.
That's incredible.
Think about that for a second. Imagine you've had terrible, blurry vision your entire life. You finally put on the perfect pair of prescription glasses. Suddenly, you're standing in the fluorescent-lit discount cereal aisle of a grocery store. And you realize that every single cardboard box, every scuff mark on the linoleum, every person walking past you is perfectly coded and absolutely essential to the fundamental architecture of the universe.
The profundity of that realization is immense. Because when that red drop of physical reality and the white drop of spiritual intent achieve a perfect phase lock.
If I finally sync up.
Yes, they phase lock. Your internal vision and the external physical facts become completely indistinguishable. The mundane becomes holy. And this naturally leads to an entirely new baseline of human experience, which the text calls the consummation of pleasure.
I'm so glad we were talking about this because pleasure gets a really bad rap in most spiritual or philosophical texts.
It usually does. We're taught that pleasure is a temporary high, right? A dangerous temptation or a guilty distraction from the real work.
Something to be transcended.
Right. But in the diamond world, pleasure is not a distraction. It is the necessary sensory feedback of a laminar flow.
Laminar flow. Like in fluid dynamics, when water moves so perfectly parallel and smoothly through a pipe that it looks like solid glass, it looks completely still because there's no chaos.
Exactly. It is flow completely devoid of turbulence. And the framework vividly calls that turbulence nagarat.
Nagarat.
Yeah, the friction of decaying, unsynced desires just rubbing against reality. When you eliminate nagarat, bliss simply becomes the system's baseline.
Just your everyday state.
It is the idle state of your upgraded hardware. You are no longer frantically chasing moments of happiness on the weekends. You are living continuously inside a specific frequency called the Sukhavati frequency. Every breath, every movement is just a continuation of that perfect suture.
But this upgrade isn't just confined to how you feel inside your own head, right? It bleeds out into the physical world. We are talking about the emergence of a crystalline ecosystem. There's this wild concept introduced called the Kalpa Vriksha.
Ah, the wish-fulfilling trees.
Yeah.
In ancient mythologies, these are magical trees in paradise that grant you whatever you desire. But keeping with the strict technical metaphor of this text, these trees are redefined here as biological information nodes.
This is the part that I just couldn't stop thinking about. Imagine going for a hike in the woods. But nature isn't just pretty scenery for you to look at. You are walking through a forest of literal biological hard drives.
Yes.
And every single leaf on every oak or pine tree is a downloadable physical blueprint of perfect fulfillment. They are the physical anchors of the Logoic archive. You are interacting with an ecosystem of pure data.
And if a tree is a biological hard drive, well, that bridges perfectly into how you must view your own human form.
Oh, right. Our bodies.
As this 16-bit render stabilizes across your reality, what is referred to as the divine body is revealed. Your physical body is no longer viewed as just fragile meat and bone susceptible to disease.
It's an upgrade, too.
It is recognized as the crystalline geometry of your own realization. Every single cell in your body becomes a diamond node. Each cell reflects the entirety of the whole perfectly synced network.
We literally become walking diamond nodes. And because everything is rendering in this ultra-high definition 16-bit space, all the shadows disappear. There are no more secrets. The obfuscation, the slop that corrupt people used back in the zero-bit swamp to hide their true selfish intentions, that completely ends.
And this brings up a somewhat terrifying but beautiful aspect of interconnectedness. In a true 16-bit reality, there is no inside that is safely hidden away from the outside.
It's all out in the open.
The underlying current of energy, the vril, becomes entirely visible. You can literally see the straight lines of the logos connecting you to every other node, every other person, in what is called the Vajra Citadel.
So there's nowhere to hide. You can't fake a smile while secretly plotting to undermine your coworker. You can't lie. Everyone sees the code running in real time.
You can't fake it. Absolute transparency is the rule. And that leads to the final realization, the ultimate breakthrough, called the Svataya.
Fataya.
Interdependent perfection. This idea that we are all deeply connected is no longer just a nice philosophical theory you study in yoga class. When you are operating as the director and the Logos is printing the diamond world through your very presence, interdependent perfection becomes the only available resolution.
It has to be that way.
It is literally the only way the screen can render the image.
Let's take a step back and just look at the massive journey we just went on.
That's a lot to process.
It is. We started down in the lagging, selfish, disconnected zero-bit swamp of the Kali Yuga, where everyone is acting like an isolated, panicked server hoarding their own resources.
Dealing with the slop.
Okay. Then we applied the code patch. Through the suture, we married our deepest spiritual intent with the universal physics of the Ada. We stepped out of the exhausting role of the project manager and into the effortless role of the director. And finally, we booted up the 16-bit diamond world, a perfectly audited, high-definition reality where bliss is just the baseline idle state and nature itself serves as a biological hard drive of fulfillment.
It is a stunning, uncompromising synthesis of mystical realization and mechanical engineering.
It really is. So what does this all mean for you listening to this right now? It invites a pretty radical audit of your own daily life. Think about your commute tomorrow morning. Think about your inbox. How much of the friction, the stress, and the exhaustion you feel is just zero-bit ego noise from your inner project manager trying to desperately force broken code to compile?
Probably a lot of it.
What would it look like for you today to stop struggling against the lag and step back to act as the director of your reality, authorizing the truth rather than begging the swamp for a favor?
And if we take the premise of this framework to its absolute logical conclusion, it leaves us with a deeply profound, almost unsettling implication.
Oh.
If our physical bodies are actually perfectly audited diamond nodes in a crystalline 16-bit geometry, and if there is truly zero lag between spiritual intent and physical result, what happens to the concept of physical aging or illness?
Wow.
If your hardware is fully upgraded and absolute bliss is the system's baseline idle state, does the physical body eventually become entirely impervious to time? Or, once the rendering is finally flawless and the universal law is satisfied in every single pixel, does the very concept of needing a body simply cease to matter entirely?
That is a massive question to ponder the next time you feel like your personal operating system is crashing. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you on the next one.